have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Howdy, and welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I'm Kalil, and with me today is a nice relative to my awkward fart.
Well, you're darn tootin' there. Howdy. Yo. Tater tots.
Who are thou, strange cowboy of the Twin Peaks?
I'm the Unplugged Professor, still reeling in on howdy. Like, why? Why, Kalil?
I think that, we're like 43, 44, somewhere in their episodes deep.
And so now this is the new character trait.
It's time to shake it up.
It's time to shake it up.
I'm going through our podcast midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis? Are we going to end around the 90s?
I don't know. Maybe. We don't know how long this is going to go for.
Well, as we're contemplating our mortality, I've got to say, I've got some questions for you, Kalil.
Okay.
Some of those questions do involve, who are you?
Okay.
How have you been? And how this podcast has changed your entire life and scope and ways. And where are the bodies?
Okay, so I think I'm Kalil.
Yes.
Mandarin orange, 7 waffle cone.
Mm-hmm.
I would say are probably my answers to those questions. I have a question for you in return.
Yes.
Today we're talking about the special features of Twin Peaks. Yet again, there continue to be more. This time we're talking about the interviews. My question for you, Professor, what do you think of the interviews?
I believe that they were incredibly insightful and honestly showed a heavy amount of character for almost the majority of individuals here. Now, mind you, there may be a little sense of bias here and there because I'm sure that they don't want anyone bad-mouthing the show like on the DVDs
They were
and Blu-rays.
They were edited interviews.
They were edited, some more than others, and it seems that there has been a general focus on the odds and ends of the production. But for the most part, no, it seems like this was a very unique community as opposed towards other Hollywood productions. Or that's what the majority of sentiment I've been getting.
And in some ways still continues to be a unique community with the 2017 revival of the series and the new crop of fans both offline and online.
The new crop?
We grow them. Twin Peaks fans are not born, they're grown. It's a common saying here in the West.
Howdy, welcome to the Twin Peaks Farmyard.
And, we're going to be talking about these interviews for quite a long time in this episode. I just want to clarify right off the bat, this is not a replacement or supplement for checking out these interviews yourself. If you have, the Z to A collection or the Complete Mystery and they have these features, or someone has it and you can borrow it from them, check it out from the actual source material, because no amount of us talking about, Ray Wise is going to replace hearing Ray Wise.
There is a performance to each of these voices that do stand out on their own, so I do heavily recommend checking them out either before, after, or during the pod.
Yeah,
you want to watch
even,
it at the same time.
Pause it, because we go in order of the discs. But we're just offering commentary and a bit of a resource that we know when we get closer to the return, we're going to fall back on this knowledge. So we're going to check out these features anyway. So we might as well share our thoughts with you as we do it. And if this interests you, we're happy to have you join.
In this case today, we're looking at the Z to A collection Blu-rays, and we are going through these various disc numbers. I know, Kalil, you wanted to share some of those disc numbers just in case people wanted to.
So as we get to them, I'll let you know where they're at as we get to them. Notably, we're not going to be talking about disc 10.
Yep.
It's like Judy. Right, Mr. David Bowie Jeffries? We're not going to talk about Judy.
We're not going to talk about Judy.
And we're not going to talk about disc 10. Because disc 10 has some spoilery things I didn't even want the professor to get a hold of. Because we got I put the play button, I hit the button on the PS4 mote, and it opened up Between Two Worlds on disc 10, and it got spooky. We saw cast members there, and David Lynch was insinuating certain characters are even alive. I don't want you to know who's alive and who's dead, Professor.
Yeah, that's not a preference. I think that even sooner than that,
you should go in assuming everyone's dead in Twin Peaks.
This was the first one you had a hunch on. We were going crazy marathoning all of these special features, and you were correct. So
it was the only one that was made around 2017. It was right before the return aired, I believe.
There may be a future episode where we do either a mini episode or we do something on a look back.
Or we'll forget.
We will not forget.
Oh.
I will not let us forget.
If we do forget, let it be known who was supposed to remember.
We're going to comb absolutely everything that we can.
We're going to comb that desert.
To Twin Peaks.
The Twin Peaks Desert.
The Twin Peaks Desert.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to Twin Peaks Desert. And obvious content spoiler warnings for all of Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me. We might bring up the short films or any David Lynch film, Dune or before.
Yep, and there will be points where there will be light mentions like Blue Velvet throughout this entire series of interviews, just because some people have been working with David Lynch with certain projects. I think the most explicit one in which like there are spoilers for would be from James and his interview from the Magical Interactive Grid, which we'll get to later, talking more on Eraserheads. So if you're all cool with that, hey, welcome in.
The first interviews on the Zodiac Collection are on disc 3. It's called A Slice of Lynch.
Yeah.
And this is an interview that I remember seeing years and years and years ago on, I want to say, the Twin Peaks Gold Box. So it's been around for a while. And it's, I think, mid-2000s. David Lynch is at a diner. It's like framed almost narratively.
Yes, it is heavily like... It's almost as if you're going into a little bit of a short film, almost when you're entering in. Which, by the way, if you were to walk into this bar and there's a notable means of a slice of Lynch, what do you think a slice of Lynch tastes like?
I think it would have a very flaky outside crust.
We agree
It'd
there.
Be very, very, like, attractive outside, but on the inside, it's maggots. I'm pretty sure, like, on the inside, there's, like, decay, but, like... It's decay that's productive. Like, it's the things underneath the ground to steal, again, the Blue Velvet imagery here, to something that's underneath that it's like the sustenance of the earth that's kind of gross.
You see, like, when I'm going into... I don't think gross myself. Whenever I'm thinking, and I'm early to Lynch, this may change. I think that it's like pie crust. Like, it's got that nice flaky crust that we just mentioned, but it's almost as if the filling isn't pie, but it's like wet pie crust. Like, it's just more crust. It's like it's something familiar,
so
because you've already made it
mean?
past the pie crust, and you're going into more pie crust, so you're starting to work with it. It's like, yeah, this is about the same, but at the same time, it's being done in a different way.
So it's a
and
pie.
I don't know how I feel about it, and I think that that's a lot of what I end up getting out of the situation. So yes, it is a pie. David Lynch as a flavor. A slice of David Lynch is a pie.
You know, that's entirely valid. But what the pie that David Lynch gets at the diner, would you believe it, is a slice of cherry pie on a plate.
What?
And he starts looking at this pie and contemplating it, really thinking, potentially feeling. We don't know exactly what he's thinking. But he looks upon this pie, and we get some audio.
We got some audio. Yes, we do.
Some audio. Flashing lights.
Flashing lights, which most notably, I wanted to have something flashing on my end to flash in your eyes to help replicate it. My black light flashlight is dead, so I couldn't do it for this pod. So I'm just going to make cool little movements over here that are sudden to just disorient you.
Professor, this might come as a surprise, but this podcast is an audio podcast. So the only one who's seeing you wave your arms right now like a dingus is me. This is not enhancing the experience for the listener at all. I don't even know if it's doing anything for me.
This is enhancing the experience for me.
I hope you can hear the audio of his chair creaking is the only thing the audience is going to know about here.
They don't need to know. It's about us in the moment, and then we give that energy back to the audience.
So David Lynch is having a moment with his pie, and we're hearing these famous quotes from Twin Peaks playing. Even some from season 2 I thought was interesting. It's not just the David Lynch episodes.
And won't you know it, even something wonderful and strange is quoted inside there, huh? Wink, wink.
And then at the table, suddenly, as if by magic, we have 2 cast members and a crew member from the original production of Twin Peaks.
Yep. We have everyone's favorite individuals, Kalil, Matchkin, and JW.
Entities otherwise known as Mädchen im Eck, Kyle Mclaughlin, and John Wentworth. Mädchen im Eck is Shelley Johnson. Kyle Mclaughlin is Dale Cooper, and John Wentworth is not someone I guess I hear as much about in Twin Peaks discourse. He was the post-production supervisor for, I believe, the entire original series. It didn't stay either way in the interview. I don't think he came back for the return. In fact, when I searched for his information, the Twin Peaks wiki doesn't even have an article for John Wentworth. He doesn't even have an article, so just glancing here, I don't know for sure if he was in the return or not. So the interview just jumps between David Lynch and these 3, with David Lynch taking on the main role of leading the conversation. There's a lot of times where Lynch will just say things and everyone just kind of nods and answers his questions and responds. There's just kind of some random things that we want to highlight as we go through. One thing we just get out of the way, right? Just to talk about it. David Lynch and Mädchen im Eck.
Yep.
We have commented about it when we were watching the show, the way that Gordon Cole kisses Shelley Johnson.
Yep.
We speculated, we commented.
Yep.
This is one of the first times that you've seen those two talk to each other as people, not as actors. So my question for you is, what did you think of the interview's elements between David Lynch and Machen Amek?
I'm going to say first and foremost, people's professionalism can still peek through. We can see a fair amount of a person through this, but we have to go as much into the spirit and words that people are giving forward into the interview and trusting that amount.
Right.
So, with that being said, it's almost as if we nosedive straight into that subject almost immediately.
Like, one of the first things David Lynch does is tell us and also Machen Amek just how stunningly beautiful she is.
And Machen, it makes sure that we know that she had a great time kissing David Lynch.
And there's like this super weird moment when they're talking later about how they each came to be involved in Twin Peaks, and Machen doesn't remember how exactly she got the role of Shelley, at least the way she does it in this interview. She mentions that she just remembers being in a hotel room with the Twin Peaks script and like learning it, but doesn't remember exactly how it came to be. And it's at this moment where David Lynch just makes this like side little comment as this conversation's happening, where he says that it's a kind of a good thing she doesn't remember, and he says, quote, "The pills must have worked," which you can interpret however you wish charitably.
Yep.
That doesn't sound good to the outside out of context.
Yep.
I take that as a joke to mean that in the joke that he had drugged this young actor and brought her to a hotel room, and her memory is foggy of that day, and he is glad about it in the joke. Now, look, I don't know the exact relationship, at least within regards to the interview. Machen Amek definitely is acting as though her and David Lynch are like really good friends and that she truly enjoyed the time that she spent with him. Every single interview where David Lynch's name is brought up by anyone on any of these discs, it's positive. Everyone loves David Lynch and says he's great with actors.
Which, mind you, again, is my comment whenever it comes down to where would we expect a negative interview inside of the special features. Now, mind you, it may be experience where everyone is very fond and enjoys their time with David Lynch. That may very well be true. And he may be this very kindly soul and this honest soul as people are giving through. And that might just be the relationship that is with actors, as opposed to it's that one time we saw that one guy get yelled at for the use of puce, I believe it was, for the material.
Pumice.
I don't know what puce is.
I don't think that's a thing, is it?
Apparently puce is a color of dark red or purple brown.
Okay, that's fair enough. Use the wrong shade for the curtains or something. It's hard to say. I mean, like, I think looking at this like 15 years later, or however long it's been, that sort of joke wouldn't be said most likely on a camera right now. But at the same time, there might just be their type of banter, that they have that joking relationship and they're comfortable with each other saying that. It's just out of context on camera. It's a bit awkward when we don't have that context.
Yep, it is something that, like other pieces of David Lynch or someone amongst Twin Peaks doing something, is very questionable in the modern day. That is something that we just kind of had to put through a modern lens of scrutiny one way or another.
Sure.
So, but I'm
Speaking
sure that
of
we'll
beautiful
get to
women,
that later on in the interviews.
Speaking of beautiful women, Marilyn Monroe, largely considered by many people to be very beautiful. People are saying it. Citation needed, perhaps, but people are saying it. And I didn't know this, or at least I didn't remember it, that David Lynch, he first met Mark Frost because of one of Mark Frost's books. It was a book on Marilyn Monroe titled The Goddess. And according to Lynch in this interview, they were going to write a screenplay together for a movie adaptation of that. I think that's interesting because Lynch never, he might indirectly reference Marilyn Monroe, but it's definitely, even though it's not something I think of like explicitly referenced in his work very much, I can totally understand Lynch finding Marilyn Monroe interesting as a figure, given all of Lynch's fixations with Hollywood, the 1950s, and kind of portrayals of femininity in that concept.
You just need to look at the cheek lady inside of the special room inside of Eraserhead, and I'm sure that people could have images of Marilyn Monroe come to mind.
So it's an interesting meeting place for those two.
It's an interesting meeting place. I suppose I must have misheard because I thought it was just a screenplay. I wasn't sure if it was an adaptation. Might have just
a screenplay for the book.
Again, might have just misheard at that moment, but regardless, amongst that, there were just future products that went through just because whatever the screenplay may have been did
Fell
not get
through.
picked up. Yep. But later on, they ended up having a little bit of a tussle on a few things, but eventually it came into a TV show that was going to become the Northwest Passage.
And before that, I'm going to go back a little bit here.
Time travel.
One saliva bubble.
Excuse you. If
You
I
know
can
what
get you a napkin.
you watched the interviews.
I can get you a napkin if you need to clean that up.
So before Twin Peaks, before Northwest Passage, they were going to write a comedy which turned into One Saliva Bubble as a script. And according to David Lynch, that almost went. So we don't live in the world in which One Saliva Bubble happened, but we almost did.
This could have been the wonderful and strange One Saliva Bubble podcast.
You know, you're talking about me needing a napkin, but it honestly sounds like you need it much more than I do, Professor. It sounds like that.
That didn't work out. So we moved on to newer, brighter pastures, and that pasture happened to be Northwest Passage.
You don't know if it's brighter. Maybe One Saliva Bubble would have been the brightest of them all.
It could have been.
What if Twin Peaks is half as good as One Saliva Bubble would have been?
Here's the thing. It didn't happen.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I don't believe in the One Saliva Bubble. It popped before it could even begin.
Okay.
Meanwhile,
fine.
Northwest Passage was going to take place in North Dakota.
North Dakota.
North Dakota. Like one of those states which does not pronounce its H.
Yeah.
Because the bright pastures are the flat lands that we see all across it.
which then makes sense why they shifted it over to Washington. David Lynch had made comments about the woods being important.
Yep.
You don't really have them as much in the Dakotas.
You can find them in patches.
In patches, but not necessarily the way that Washington State has them. So at first, their writing attempts began when they were kind of separate from each other. They did phone calls back and forth through the writing, and David Lynch was in New York a lot at the time. Mark Frost was over in L.A., I believe. And it was another interview later with Mark Frost we'll get to where he kind of alluded to there being a strike happening around that time, too. So for various factors, the writing started off distance, but then once the climate changed and we had a situation where David Lynch could go back to L.A., they began writing in more earnest and ironed out those details. Sounds like rather quickly and rather clearly for what would become a pilot episode, or for the European edition, a standalone movie with an ending.
Yes.
According to what is remembered over here, they had finished writing the script for the pilot around 10 o'clock one night, and then David Lynch had driven home, and he read the script right away. He was interested to read it, probably 11 o'clock at night, whenever he got home. And when he was done, he called up Mark Frost right back up on the phone again. And conveniently, Mark Frost had also just finished reading the script again. And they both were just like, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah,
and they were both really surprised and happy about that their first draft of the script, at least, really liked it. Now, obviously, changes probably happened from that point, but it seems like a lot of Twin Peaks had clicked rather quickly. Which I think is true to the spirit of Twin Peaks, that moments of impulse and emotion carry over even more than long-term planning, is kind of the sense we get, at least from a lot of these interviews. That I think if we're wondering, about the production of Twin Peaks, I think this interview and a lot of other interviews here really go a long way to suggest that Twin Peaks was mostly improvised, mostly made up on the spot. There's no indication that David Lynch and Mark Frost mapped out all of season 1 and season 2 in the get-go. They weren't even sure if they were going to get past a pilot.
It seems like the series of events that have happened that have made Twin Peaks the way, even to be and the way it is, have been a series of people running around with crates and bottles in the middle of a thunderstorm, trying to catch as much lightning as possible.
And they did catch lightning in a bottle, one could argue.
Yes.
I do feel like maybe David Lynch and Mark Frost knew the killer. That might have been known since the very beginning.
That was something known from the beginning, and as we'll get to later, eventually had 3 people.
That might have been the only thing that they knew from the beginning. I'm not sure if any other details were planned out in advance.
Yes.
Because even the Red Room was just kind of an accidental creation because they had to make that European ending. And David Lynch in the interview says we cannot talk about why. It's the Judy of the conversation. It'll bring up dark things we don't want to get into right now.
Yeah, no, he makes that language very, very clear.
Lynch is a man of extremes in his speech.
He is.
He's not one for subtlety in his word choice.
It sounds like whenever something does not quite go in a certain way or direction, though he does give a lot of liberty and strengths to people, whenever he's got something on his own mind to sort of direct, that's something very hard to change.
He's a very absolute person.
Yes.
I think I got to respect that on some level.
In fact, the absolution, we almost didn't have Machen as part of the staff because David Lynch was very much opposed. But it's honestly thanks to casting individuals such as
Joanna,
who is multiply mentioned throughout all the interviews for her fantastic work. So, hey, unsung heroes we'll never know about or don't know about except in light ways.
But speaking of heroes, Kyle MacLachlan, Dale Cooper. We can't really imagine Twin Peaks without Kyle MacLachlan as Dale Cooper. At least I can't.
I can.
I can't. Who would you cast as your next option?
Oh, I was just imagining everything without Dale Cooper.
Oh.
And everything's just kind of stuck in its own ways as it has been for decades.
So the changing agent is gone.
Yes.
Agent. In case anyone didn't pick up my subtle joke.
I'm sorry. I didn't pick it up. Let me try.
Thank you. I'm not going to edit out the pause of how long it took you to find the buttons. I think that's funnier to leave that in there.
Okay.
So, Kyle MacLachlan, when he first was offered this, he'd worked with David Lynch when it came to Dune, which we've covered, and he also worked with Blue Velvet, which we're actually covering soon. But this was the first role that he really, really clicked with. And at first, he wasn't sure he was going to get it because he thought he was too young for the role.
Yes.
Which I kind of understand in one regard because this sort of expert agent comes in with all these masterful skills. He expected someone older. But I think the youth of him also played into his character as the show would progress, that sort of youthful energy, and that on and off again toying with relationship with Audrey, I think would have not sent exactly the same way had he been an older actor.
And I think that there is something to say about someone who is more youthful, taking larger strides, and even trying to follow a certain lead to the point of even one's own personal doom could be something described on a youthful energy, if you will. So I think that it was a very fitting point of role, and I think that he did much better with that than inside of Dune. Contrary.
Wow. Little dig there. I don't blame McLaughlin for that, because McLaughlin's first movie and what he was given. Yeah. I think the character's hard to get down.
I'm not denying that. I think
you said he didn't do as well. I'm not going to blame him.
I agree. Here's the thing.
He was set up to fail.
When I say that the seatbelts aren't safe inside this vehicle, I understand there may have been steps taken inside the production of this vehicle that made it very unsafe and should not be driven. But at the same time, I'm still going to compliment when those seatbelts are put in a better place.
Well, Kyle MacLachlan wasn't sure if it was even worth buckling the seatbelts because he wasn't sure they're going to be driving for too long. He thought that Twin Peaks might have been a movie of the week, but he didn't think it would get picked up. He didn't think we'd have a series to drive through, metaphorically. Yes. He said, quote, "No one is going to understand it. No one is going to appreciate it." So I was going to pose it as a question to you, but I don't know if there's really much to even ask here.
Okay.
Do you think that Kyle MacLachlan's suspicion that the network execs would not have taken up as a show? I mean, if you were kind of in Kyle MacLachlan's position, having just done the pilot, I know it's been a while since you've seen it, would you expect a show like that to get picked up?
The hard part is that we're in two drastically different climates during the time. From what I do understand, Twin Peaks is much more different than the average television show upon its release. The
closest thing would be soap operas.
Inside of this this current climate, I think that there'd be a big audience for something like Twin Peaks. I think that the overall just themes and the strange aspects of it is something that people would very much eat up. And
even the
binge
success
through
of shows
Netflix.
like Riverdale, I think, show that it's still around. There's still that interest.
Riverdale is an entity.
No, I've legitimately considered if I were to do another long form content podcast thing. There's so much because I've heard of how weird Riverdale gets.
Oh, you've heard.
I've heard.
You have not seen.
I have not seen. Have you seen?
I have.
I've just watched the Super Bunny Hop video and other people talking about it.
Hey there, podcasters, or you guys aren't the podcasters, we're the podcasters, listeners. If you want a reversal on the subject, and if we ever get more time, and that's something you're interested in, please email us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com.
Professor, we have so many things to cover still.
As in, one thing at a time, friends.
Yes. I've heard season 1's pretty normal, but after that, it goes to town.
I think we could have a lot of fun.
So, McLaughlin, speaking more about Agent Cooper, he said that not only was it one of the roles he got most into, it was also one of the best introductions he's ever had to a role. So it sounds like the first thing they shot with him was the opening scene in the pilot. And the way they did it is they had the car being towed kind of up a hill. And he had to do it really quickly because they were about to hit a turn. Yes. So he only got 2 takes on it. And that was enough, though. He got it in those 2 takes. And basically, as soon as he was, talking into the tape recorder talking to Diane, reading off that list from the Lamplighter Inn, one of those two, that it just clicked into place and felt right. And kind of looking back on it, he says that the entire character exists in that couple-minute piece.
Yes. I think that one can most certainly lose themselves in driving, which I'm very impressed whenever someone can act on their own. No, I think that if there's one point to sell people on the series, and especially the character Dale Cooper, it's those few minutes. I thoroughly agree with that.
And then the last thing I guess I remember from this interview with Kyle McLaughlin is he talked very favorably and fondly of Mclaughlin, the actor for Sheriff Truman.
Yeah.
And he basically said that Mclaughlin was the most laid-back people he ever met, that he's extremely easygoing, and I think Machen jumped in saying he's very kind. And, you know, he talked about their both on-screen and off-screen chemistry, which I remember we were doing the special features last time. We saw that Super Bowl ad where we saw the different takes of that. You really get that chemistry out of them at any moment they're together, even in the deleted scenes.
We get it to even like the one scene which we have no clue why it's there. That's an outtake, quote, where they nearly kiss. So there's a lot that seems to be going between the two of them, and I'm glad that the chemistry seems to have also been off the camera as well.
Oh, random question, Professor.
Random answer.
What is your zodiac sign?
I think it's Libra.
You think it's Libra?
I think it's Libra.
Okay, I'm a Sagittarius, so I have the same sign as Machen and Mech.
Okay, that's a sign.
Because for whatever reason, just as smoothly as I just interrupted you with that question, David Lynch interrupts the interview to ask Machen and Mech what her sign is.
Yeah.
And then later it gets looped back around and Kyle McLaughlin shares his sign. I can't remember if John Wentworth shared his, but
John Wentworth is a mystery.
And then like David Lynch later talks about like his favorite numbers. He talked about like 7 being one of his favorite numbers.
My favorite 17.
And Machen says one of her favorite numbers 17, and he stops her to say 17's an 8. And I get what he means, right? 1 and 7, I get it. 8. But he like stops her to correct her on this.
Excuse me.
It's very, very focused energy. I know that David Lynch does like the number of the day thing on YouTube. I don't pay attention to that, but he's into numerology quite a bit.
He's into it quite a lot.
Astrology, numerology.
For me, when I just heard that, I didn't even think of it's like 1 + 7. I was thinking to myself, yeah, it's like an 8 out of 10. It's a really good number there, Mason. Let me tell you about 7.
It's a 1 and a 7. It's an 8. You add them together.
It still came out as that energy, though.
Okay. Fair enough.
You did good, but I can do you better.
Yeah, but he said 8's still pretty good, though. He has no problem with 8.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what a bad number is. Like, I would assume 6. 6 is a reputation.
6 has a reputation, but it's also known as the perfect number.
I don't know. To David Lynch, is it perfect?
Is it perfect?
Maybe David Lynch doesn't want perfect.
Maybe he does not want it perfect.
He wants really good.
He wants
not perfect.
Too bad for him. I want better.
Okay.
If he wants to throw down with Machen, I'll throw down with David Lynch. We'll have this whole entire...
Let's throw down with Machen a little bit here and talk about her side of things. She's the other actor in this interview that's focused on quite heavily. And we learn a little bit more about her backstory and how she came to Twin Peaks, other than the weird hotel situation. We found out that at age 16, she was emancipated. And she had to explain to David Lynch what that meant. So, again, in case any listeners aren't really sure, she basically was released from custody from her parents. That she was able to get a job as an adult at that point at age 16, moved to Hollywood, started auditioning for everything she could, and she started filming for Baywatch that's when Twin Peaks kind of fell on her. And Twin Peaks fell under her, sounds way more violent. But she also had to explain what Baywatch was to David Lynch, which I think is very interesting. And there's sort of this little reputation I've noticed that David Lynch may or may not watch a lot of things. I don't know. It's unclear to me because Baywatch is a bigger show than Twin Peaks. In terms of like popularity, cultural knowledge, more people know what Baywatch is in general than Twin Peaks, I would say.
I think now...
Even
perhaps?
back then, Baywatch was pretty big.
No, that's what I'm getting at. Back then, yes. Now, yes. But I think that Twin Peaks has more staying power.
It
than
has
Baywatch.
a more loyal following.
Yes.
I think the general awareness of what Baywatch is greater, but the people who know Twin Peaks often know more about it. My point, though, is she didn't know what Baywatch was, so she explained it's a beach show and went on from there. And at first, Machen and Mech had auditioned for Donna's role, for Laura Flynn Boyle's role as Donna. Not as Shelley. How do you think that, I know it's speculative, not your favorite thing, but do you think Machen and Mech could have pulled off Donna?
Maybe.
I mean, we already had Moira Kelly do Donna, so we know Donna can have multiple actors.
Different characters and different roles means that we're going to get different energies, which I do also feel with the filming of Twin Peaks could have led to different styles, different plot lines, and working off of the different strengths.
Yeah.
So when you tell me if she'd do well with Donna, well, I think that question almost proposes if she'd fit in Donna as a mold. I think that she'd just make a new Donna at that point, and I guess the answer to the question then is yes.
And then there's also the question correspondingly, what would happen to Shelley? Like, is Laura Flynn Boyle Shelley now, or is a new actor?
Everyone is playing Shelley. Everyone else.
I enjoy what Machen brings to Shelley enough that I would not want that experiment to be played out.
Okay.
I am quite content with that. I'm a big Shelley fan. So, and David Lynch is also a fan more of the actor. I almost get that feeling. We brought up some of the curious lines from earlier. We touched upon the topic of the nicknames at the very beginning. That Kyle McLaughlin gets called Kale because Dino De Laurentiis couldn't say the name correctly or accurately to the accent.
In this case, like, it seems that, like, David Lynch, like, she had approached David Lynch because, like, maybe he just doesn't know how to pronounce my name.
Machen had approached him. Yep.
And then, like, that's when David Lynch was like, yeah, of course I know that. I'm purposefully doing this.
Yeah.
And I will keep doing this despite the fact that you're bringing this up to me.
So, yeah, she brings it up after, like, kind of being nervous to do it because, David Lynch is a big-time director. You know, my name is pronounced Machen, right? And he's like, I know, Matchkin. And just continued with it. And she seems to be, in the interview, positive about that nickname. No concerns. I just am thinking of the situation of someone kindly telling you how to pronounce their own name, and you just insist on your own pronunciation anyway.
There are layers. I think we could make a full podcast episode of just, like, the sheer amount of, like, tentative discomfort you and I have with most of, like, the things that come up between David Lynch and Machen.
And it's not from Machen's point of view. Like, I have nothing... She didn't say anything weird. I had nothing with Machen at all that was rubbing me weird.
Yep. So, and again... Maybe this all could be like 100% true, 100% transparent. There's still that sort of itch I got that I got to be honest with myself on.
And she really does speak positively though. Machen Mech really speaks positive to Twin Peaks. She reflects that at the time she was so young when she did Twin Peaks that she hadn't really done a lot of Hollywood sets yet. And when she moved past Twin Peaks into more acting opportunities afterward, she got used to what is called like real Hollywood. And she noticed that it's just not the same thing. Like, you don't see that kind of energy and sort of the experience on set of Twin Peaks in other shows. And I think that corresponds to what a lot of other actors and even directors were saying about the energy of Twin Peaks behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There was so much camaraderie among the actors, and there was so much trust from David Lynch, not only the actors, but in the directors and writers to kind of carry on this torch, that it was a lot more spontaneous and a lot more like a home for a lot of these people. Mm-hmm. And, David Lynch is a big part of that comfort, I think, for a lot of these actors.
Yeah, no, I think that that's actually a common thread that we see throughout just various productions whenever it comes down to, say, for example, the push to try to even make Eraserhead a thing, or whenever it comes down to, like, David Lynch sort of, like, collecting actors from his previous experiences and bringing them aboard going forward just because it seems that there's a shared passion between them.
Bringing them aboard?
Yeah.
Aboard, you mean?
Yep, aboard.
He's not bringing them a pig.
They're probably a pig, too.
Okay, all right.
If you had a story in which if someone was brought a pig as a good, like, sort of parting gift between the two, would you be surprised?
I mean, David Lynch did do a whole ad campaign sort of advocating for Laura Dern to win awards using a cow. So
I rest my
case. He has a bit of a record with this idea.
He has a record
of livestock.
with livestock, yes.
Yeah. He's also had a record of talking in numerous interviews and things we've quoted in the past about his feelings on the revealing of Laura Palmer's killer. There's a bit of a broken record, one could argue. I'm going to still consistently play that broken record.
If we keep hearing that broken record, I will continue to play my broken record to have a battle of the record players, I suppose.
I want to just dump a giant David Lynch quote. I am going to do my attempt at a David Lynch impersonation as usual. It's going to be about as bad as usual, probably.
I believe in you. I believe in you.
Thank you.
I think
so. First things first, gotta summon him back up. Angelo Badalamenti, and not that high, not that nasally. Angelo Badalamenti, Angelo Badalamenti.
Every time this happens, I'm just afraid that there's going to be a Beetlejuice response. I don't know the man. I don't know what he looks like. Maybe it's already happened.
So it's a great thing to have the pilot and the first season and the second season all together, the whole story, and it's very, very good. The thing that kills me is that the murder of Laura Palmer was never supposed to be solved. And the reason is this beautiful little goose. And the little goose is laying golden eggs. Why would you kill this little goose? It's unreal. It's a huge sadness. A huge sadness. And an absurdity that ever happened. If you translate that pressure is a need to know. And that need to know is what draws you in. Anyway, that's what happened. Anyway, it's that kind of thing. But there was room for so many other mysteries. But that mystery was sacred and held the other ones. It was the tree and the other ones were the branches. And like I just said, it's a sadness. Quote,
I understand where he's coming from. I sympathize where he's coming from. I think that there is a root that does sort of like tug at the sort of mental strings that if Laura Palmer's killer was always a mystery, maybe that could be whispered and speculated at all times. I'm a big fan of works that are heavily set in speculation with questions left completely unanswered. Some of my favorite media comes with that. But I don't believe that that is the entire goose. I think that relying on that as the entire goose blinds people to the side of the egg.
I hate to say I agree with you.
You hate to say you agree with me.
It hurts me to say I agree with you, Unplugged Professor.
It hurts you. Like
yes.
we can't like have any. It's coming closer to the holidays. This is about a time of unity.
Yes. I don't like the holidays. Bombug.
Bombug.
I rooted for the Grinch as a kid.
I was scared.
Big Grinch fan.
My mother had to drag me out of the Grinch film just because I cried so much as he wrapped someone in plastic, actually.
They deserved it.
No, seriously.
He doesn't do that to people who don't deserve it. Look, if the Grinch has wrapped you in plastic, wrapped in plastic, the Grinch killed Laura Palmer. That's the answer.
But what I'm getting at is
that Laura Palmer.
We had some glimpses into like playing with the idea that we do know the killer in the few episodes with Leland Palmer that I think were great. And I would not sacrifice anything in the world for Fire Walk With Me. Fire Walk With Me was an insane experience that I can't say that I can really count off the top of my head.
So that's your favorite Twin Peaks thing, right?
It's so far.
And it's also your favorite David Lynch thing.
So far, yes.
So far, which I think is notable because, as we've noticed earlier, you oftentimes had a tendency to like the thing that came after. I can't remember. Did we do Fire Walk With Me before or after The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer?
Fire Walk With Me was after The Secret Diary.
Okay, so it was the last Twin Peaks thing we encountered, but we've seen movies since then. They haven't replaced it for you yet.
No.
So intriguing, is it not?
Perhaps so. There's an amount of investment that I've gained from the characters, and for the amount that has been revealed between the books and what we've seen from Laura Palmer and the experience of the extended family, that have very much connected me towards characters such as her. It's something in which I can see myself in the old days of her podcasts being I still lightly in there, but more heavily stuck in the ways of the eldritch horror known as Laura Palmer, more than the human being as Laura Palmer.
I think also you extend a little bit into the golden goose metaphor. I'll extend his tree metaphor as well. If the tree was the mystery of who killed Laura Palmer and the branches other mysteries, you can always plant more trees.
It's not just that.
I think they already had trees growing. I think they could have watered them and grew those trees into other trees. I feel like they already had other interesting ideas, that it wasn't like everything was in this one stock. I think they diversified their investments. I don't think they needed to just put everything into this one mystery and then when it didn't work out, give up on it.
There's more than just the one tree of North Dakota that you could branch out to in this forest of opportunity.
In this forest of Washington. I also like how after David Lynch says this very long thing, he says more about this than anything else in that interview. Everyone's kind of just silent for a little while. And then Kyle McLaughlin, kind of nods his head and says, you can't change those core mysteries. And then Lynch very emphatically says no. Like, just very directly no. And then they just move on from that.
Yeah.
It's clearly like this is a triggering thing for David Lynch. The other people didn't have as much to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know how Machen, Amek, and Kyle McLaughlin really feel about that.
Okay.
I don't know just from this interview alone if they're entirely in agreement or not. I think Mark Frost would agree with David Lynch for a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a question, and you've pointed out before, Fire Walk With Me wouldn't exist if they hadn't revealed this. I mean, something else might exist instead, but not Fire Walk With Me. And David Lynch really liked Fire Walk With Me. So, if we're going to take the egg idea, he broke a few eggs, sure, but he made an omelet. And, when life gives you eggs, you make lemonade. Speaking of eggs and lemonade, John Wentworth, a very unknown person to the Twin Peaks community, not known apparently enough for a Twin Peaks wiki article. He had previously worked with David Lynch on Blue Velvet, and he later got a call he thinks from Lynch, to work on sound recording for the Twin Peaks pilot. Mm-hmm. That then grew into an opportunity to be the production manager, post-production manager. And the way he kind of explained it, he just didn't sleep. Which, Professor, I think you can relate to.
I can relate to a lot.
He would work like constantly, it sounds like, and into the primarily in the wee hours of the night. And if it wasn't for recording sound effects for like the pilot, it was all of the editing and changes that need to be made after the fact.
I love how JW, especially throughout, like speaking about his roles and the opportunities that he's done with the work with Twin Peaks and how much went into Twin Peaks itself. Every time David Lynch just like specifically said, "And what did you do? And what did you do?" It seemed like he was just more so like very vague about it, in which like, well, I worked hard. I did hard work.
And I almost wonder if it's because he did too many things.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this guy wore a lot of hats.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned unsung heroes earlier. I think that that's very true, that not only does David Lynch and Mark Frost get almost all the credit, despite there being other writers and other directors, I also think that even outside of the writers and directors, you have people like Joanna in the casting, and you have people here like John in the post-production who made Twin Peaks what it was behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't show up in front of or behind the camera.
Yeah.
They're nowhere near the camera, but they did so much to make Twin Peaks what it is.
Mm-hmm.
One could say the same about Pat Coquell.
Yes, meanwhile, when we had the one slice of David Lynch, we now have 17 pieces of pie ready for us with Pat Coquell, who was during the time of the shooting of Twin Peaks Season 2 and Fire Walk With Me. I almost called it Twin Peaks 2, Electric Boogaloo. Anyway, owned the Marty Cafe, which was the Double R Diner.
Mm-hmm. And this interview was conducted for, or at least around, the annual Twin Peaks Fan Festival over in North Bend, this time on August 20th, 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So, as of speaking, it's an over 20-year-old interview. I know the diner's under new ownership now. And she recounted her experiences of when she was first asked if she could have the diner be loaned out to these people, and her experiences during the show's runtime and afterward. And so, like, some random things came up in there. Originally, she was going to remodel the place, like, right around the time.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. We want it exactly how it is.
Yes, they wanted it exactly how it is. Interestingly enough, when she thinks of the pies, she would make pies for the crew, but she doesn't remember making cherry pies for them mainly. She made banana pies and peanut butter chocolate pie, which, I'm be honest, those sound more my style than a cherry pie.
No, absolutely. Same thing here. Like cherry pie, I will treat myself to from time to time, but like a nice little like peanut butter pie, ooh, that sounds just
it's
so
hard
good.
because if I ever say I like cream pies, it has a connotation now because that wording can be used for other things. But the problem is, I don't know how else to refer to them.
Sex things.
It's the sex things. So I'm trying to think of another. I like pies that are cream-based. It sounds more wordy.
It sounds more suspicious more than anything.
But I like coconut cream and banana cream and chocolate cream.
Here to hear, everyone. I'm glad that you enjoy your cream pies, Kalil.
Oh, no. Don't tell them that.
But
And you know what Kyle Mclaughlin didn't enjoy, though? Eating a bajillion cherry pies.
Yeah, apparently, like, there's a few things with this. For one, there was a point where, like, there was a little party planned in which, like, Kyle will be attending. So there were people who were just playing. He's like, you know what? We should get some cherry pies to remind him, you know what, of, like, Twin Peaks. This will be so great. This will be so exciting. And when it came around, it's like Kyle McLaughlin is just like, I had so many of those pies. No.
I'm done. I'm out of this.
I'm done. Good. So that's a bit humorous. I also like the idea that there were multiple cases in which, like, if they wanted pie during the production, they just had to write it off.
Like, and they would just kind of tally it for later.
Yep. There's was like this nice what I recall from the interview when I saw it was like there was also an old lady that ended up working alongside to try to help make.
Yeah, they had to hire
pies.
Extra help to make this work.
It could not just rely on the one lady.
And they normally didn't even sell whole pies. Like, they obviously sold slices, but they weren't like mainly known for their pie.
But as like things like Twin Peaks got more popular, they were just selling like so much pie and so much
People
coffee.
were standing outside in line.
Like I think she said like 45 minutes
20.
or so. 20? Okay.
Which is not that bad.
I thought it was higher.
But also you got to think this is a pretty small town diner. This isn't like used to that sort of traffic.
Yeah, no, there was like businesses complaining the fact that, hey, the parking's no.
Yep.
It's like,
but that's also where the business is coming from.
And honestly, like from her experiences with like people directly working alongside it, apparently this is another instance where she does go into how David was actually a calm, easygoing person. An outside account that was just making pies. I don't know what she'd gain from like, no one's going to interview me anymore. Oh no! But it seems like
the actors too. She had a lot of praise for the cast.
She had praise for the cast and crew. There was just like David was just someone who ended up working really kindly with people, never raised his voice from her instances because she would just hang around because, hey, it's her diner.
Nobody brought plaster of Paris instead of,
So, no, that was...
I think I said the wrong thing earlier. It's plaster of Paris was the one that guy got yelled about. So if you were typing your angry email or YouTube comment, I fixed it. I realized I was wrong.
So type your angry email and or comments to say you got it too late.
And you can send that to us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com or tweet at us at snakeeyedreams1, the numeral 1, as in one more mistake, Kalil, and you're out.
You'd been gone a long time ago. I'd be gone even more before. Hello, welcome to the Twin Peaks podcast. Nobody's here.
If this interview percolates interest in your brain, you can find it on disc 5 of the Z-Day collection.
But you know what's also on disc 5 in the Z-Day collection?
I do.
Good. Moving on.
The Mark Frost interview with Wrapped in Plastic. Same disc. This is a curious thing. So we got a lot of David Lynch from the other one. This is the majority of the Mark Frost content as far as Z-Day collection interviews.
Now, for those who do not know of Wrapped in Plastic, who are checking our podcast, could you go into more detail on who Wrapped in Plastic are?
I admit, being kind of a more recent fan, I was not there as a Twin Peaks fan in the year 2001 when this interview happened.
I think you were a baby around then.
I was in first grade, to reveal my age a little bit here. So I was not part of this culture and climate around. From what I gather, as kind of just someone passively in the background now, Wrapped in Plastic was like the big fan magazine for Twin Peaks and did a lot of work to keep interest going within the fan community in an age that was like early internet. I know that like there's still magazines now that do a lot of work. I know that I know for sure John Thorne, I follow him on Twitter. I know he still talks about Twin Peaks and does things involving Twin Peaks, but just like hugely important figures in the fan community.
Now, as far as these individuals go who are handling the interview, Craig Miller and John Thorne,
yeah.
What is their involvement in Wrapped in Plastic?
I believe they're the creators. They run it. It is their magazine.
You believe?
Yes. I think that it says it in the interview. If we're wrong, you know, or email on our Twitter.
We look forward to talking to you, Craig Miller and John Thorne.
I'm pretty sure they're the founders, creators, owners, all that sort of stuff.
We know that you may or may not be left-handed, Craig Miller. And we know what you went along with, John Thorne.
We know. This interview is shot super weird. So it is it's a phone interview.
It's a phone interview.
And we cut between two locations.
Between two cameras.
And it's a static camera at the table of John Thorne and Craig Miller, where they are on their old like 2001 cord phones, talking and having the conversation.
Yes.
And then we'll cut back to a like probably handheld camera, right? That is over in the Mark Frost realm of the hotel.
So it looks like he's in the dining room of the hotel. He may be with someone at the time.
Oh, there's a hotel room, I thought.
Oh, there were like glasses and a table. So maybe if it's like super fancy to the point that you've got a dining table in your hotel
I mean,
room.
it's Mark Frost.
I don't know how rich Mark Frost is.
Okay, fair enough.
So
either way, in the hotel.
Regardless, is what seems to be potentially a mounted camera at the start, but someone like picks up the camera
and makes bold choices with it.
And like runs up. If you ever wanted to run up the arms of Mark Frost, let me tell you, there is that shot, and it's
very strange.
It sounds just as I made it sound.
There's a lot of weird like Dutch angle close-up shots where you're like looking above. Like if you imagine talking to Mark Frost, but you're standing right next to him, but slowly behind him, looking down over him, over his shoulder at his face. You get shots like that. Congratulations.
And then you go on your knees and sort of like tilt your head a little. You got your shot right there.
It felt like they were almost too conscious. They didn't want to make like the camera work too flat, so they overcompensated a little bit with the camera work and made it way too much movement in different angles for what it just needed to be it could have just put the camera on a tripod, called it good, but instead they did this.
There's an aloofness inside of this, because I'm sure that there would be some people that would be like, oh wait, no, you got to keep it still. I'm trying to do something professional here. But no, it seems like whoever he was with, that person, they were just having a lot of fun
and they
with
were
him.
fine with it.
And yeah, Mark Frost seemed to be very good with it. So maybe, like, who knows? Like, it might have been between the questions and so on. It's like, hey, excuse me, bar staff, could you please pick up that camera and catch me at all sorts of angles and wave the cameras around? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh.
And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think everything Mark Frost says here lines up with what David Lynch has said pretty closely.
So far, I can't think of anything
between these interviews
contradict.
so far. Yeah, like they're pretty similar here. So talking about the early experiences, I don't know a Mark Frost voice the way I did the David Lynch. Arguably, I don't even know a David Lynch voice. I'm not sure if I'm doing one at all. I'm doing something. But the Mark Frost, I won't even attempt to do because I don't even know what that sounds like. Quote, "We just described a kind of murder mystery loosely set in a small town in the Pacific Northwest. And that was about all we had at that point. We wanted it to have the feel of a kind of 1950s lush Peyton Place style melodrama. And David made some strange motions with his hands as he described the wind, and they seemed to like that." I love the mention of the David Lynch hand gestures because we know exactly which one it is. Not the one you're doing right now at Me Professor. That is the reach out and grab you. That's not what we're doing. He was doing the thing with his fingers he always does in the interviews, where he kind of like moves them around. You know, it's hard to explain this over audio. Anyway, I can picture what David Lynch was doing, and I like to believe Mark Frost is like eloquently explaining these ideas, and David Lynch is just like, there's a wind, and he's just moving his hands, and the executives are like, wow, okay.
Or maybe that's just like what he was like giving off in his motions, like me, in which like I'm desperately trying to reach for the water that's closest to you, but no one's giving him the water, so everyone just assumes that's what he's thinking.
Maybe.
Give David Lynch the water.
Maybe. So interesting to know that the idea of the 1950s element was already in there from the beginning. I think that's pretty interesting. And despite that, though, Mark Frost doesn't wish it had been set in the 50s. He said that we always felt it should be in the present, but should have a kind of timeless feel, as small towns in America often do, and put it in a place where time has sort of stood still for a while. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, Kalil, push the water closest to me, because I really need some water right now.
Oh my God.
I really need it.
The water has been successfully pushed. Don't drown.
I was trying to swim in the air to get you to
Wait,
pass
I thought you were just doing a bit. That was real?
That was real!
Okay, but I was talking about hand gestures and I didn't know you were trying to clue me in on that. I thought you were doing a bit.
Me and David Lynch, we need people to understand we just need the water.
Wow. Yikes. Anyway, so what did you think of Mark Frost saying that they wanted it to be in the present, but have a timeless feel like a small town does, and a place that is time has stood still for a while?
I think that those sort of like almost contradictory sort of like uses of place as well as feel are the things that have made Twin Peaks last for so long. I think that as far as items go, when it comes to Twin Peaks, there's very rare items that anyone would ever say, wait a second, this isn't what's going on here. Mom, Dad, whatever is this strange thing? It doesn't follow any certain trends. It just is a place that people are just living isolated from another location and are very close to one another for good and ill. So I think that they do accomplish that, and especially with the newer perspective with Dale Cooper popping in.
I think the emphasis on a place where time has sort of stood still is very interesting. And that sort of tacit assumption that I think could be teased out from that the people of Twin Peaks, especially those in the bookhouse, who believe they're fighting this evil of the woods and succeeding, they believe, I think, that there was goodness in Twin Peaks, as Jean Reno says. There was goodness in Twin Peaks. Life is better there in some way. But when something outside comes in, that is where that negative change comes into the town, which you and I have spoke at length while watching the show, that there was already great evil within Twin Peaks, not just in the woods, but in the town.
I would say that
a lot of distrust, a lot of disloyalty, a lot of crime, a lot of corruption. Look no further than The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer.
I must say that whenever it comes to that, it's the acknowledgement of the evil. I think that some people may confuse good as a sense of blindness to the sense of purity that everything is fine.
When you shine a spotlight on the gross, disgusting underbelly, it's going to look pretty scary, but it was already there under.
If Twin Peaks is just basically a household in which no one's going in the basement and it's been molding in there and it's become a problem over time. But as soon as someone opens the door and points out the problem, well, then now it's a problem.
Professor, remember that pie I mentioned with the maggots inside?
No, I don't.
This is kind of what I mean.
No, it's bad. That's a bad pie.
Okay, whatever.
Unlike my pie made of pie.
Yeah.
Quality pie.
I guess I'd rather have that than the maggot pie, I guess, but whatever, to each their own. So Frost, talking about Kyle McLaughlin, he says that it wasn't like they already had the role in mind when they made Cooper, but he was the first actor cast.
Yes.
So arguably one of the most important roles was the first one cast.
Yep.
And the last member cast was Michael Onkian for Sheriff Truman. Now, this is something very interesting for certain listeners who have become aware of things involving David Lynch that we haven't gotten to yet. Hint, hint. But they were very close to casting Robert Forster for Sheriff Truman back during the original run of Twin Peaks.
Okay.
I can't say much more at this time about that, but that is very interesting.
That's sure.
For those who know, it's very interesting that Robert Forster almost was Sheriff Truman.
Yeah, sure. I'm in the lost point here, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know much about Robert Forster, so I guess I can't really talk about him in general, but there is a thing that we'll get to eventually involving that.
Exciting. Honestly,
just put a pin in this, Professor, for like a while.
Just a while.
For an undetermined while, because you'll look back and you will get a mighty guffaw out of this situation.
Wow, I can't wait to figure this out in the middle of the pages of the Secret Agent Dale Cooper book. I don't know, it could be anywhere at this point.
Continuing of Secret Agent Dale Cooper, Frost agrees, after being prompted in the interview questioning, that he does think of Agent Cooper as a modern Sherlock Holmes. This was kind of a lead-in question where Craig Miller and John Thorne were talking about how Mark Frost is a big fan of Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
Apparently from his other work. So, he admits that that's the case, but it's like Sherlock Holmes, if they cranked up the intuition meter, like, higher, way up to the highest, and then you start mixing in things with Tibetan Buddhism, dream analysis, etc., and he says, quote, he became a kind of Freudian, Jungian, Holmesian detective. Do you think that's a pretty accurate way to describe Dale Cooper?
I'd say kinda. Dale Cooper is most certainly someone that explores certain concepts for a bit, but I'm trying to think of like general deductive reasoning that like we as the audience can follow along with.
Most of it we can't follow along with. It's very random seeming.
It's sometimes random. Sometimes we just already have all the pieces in front of us. But the way that Dale Cooper sometimes just like figures things out.
Well, and also when I think of Freudian, Jungian, like dream analysis, I think of someone who like decodes cryptic imagery in their dreams and then comes up with ideas about it. No, literally in his dream, he was told who killed Laura Palmer and then forgot about it the next day.
But it's okay because, I mean, that's what happens with dreams and usual.
Yeah, Maddie died because of this.
But there is a faith that he puts into reasoning, such as, like, throwing things at bottles off in the distance.
Still not going to let go of the fact that he had that dream and didn't write it down. Oh, that's a problem.
Why would you write it down? Obviously, you'd remember until you don't.
You can't even tell over the phone? Like, no, you tell Sheriff Truman right away over the phone.
I have that same fault myself. I get overconfident in what I can remember.
Yeah, and then blood's on your hands.
Yep.
How many young women have died because you didn't write down your dreams, Professor?
It wasn't young women. It was mostly Kalil.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Frost also admits that the show was a bit of an endurance test for viewers, and partly that was on purpose. That he wrote it, and involved with writing, obviously, with Lynch, wrote it almost like a novel, page by page, kind of as it went along. And, he admitted that you have to have a certain amount of patience and endurance to follow 30, 40 character story threads all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't usually think of Twin Peaks as that hard to follow. I know you're pretty bad with names, but you still could follow it. It took a little while to get the names down.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't mean to use you as, like, the worst example, but I mean, like, I think if you can follow it, I think it's not that bad.
You heard it here, folks. If you can follow Twin Peaks, you're better than me.
I'm just saying that I think it's not that hard of a show to follow. Maybe I'm coming at it from a place of, I don't know if bias is not the word, but maybe I'm just lucky and it's not that hard for me, and for other people it's a sincere challenge. I don't think of the show as an endurance test usually.
I should get you like a cushion for your seat so you can sit taller than me.
What do you think? Do you think of the show as an endurance test?
The show, it really depends on the camp of thought that you're going into with it. I think that if there's someone who is looking for something that's more traditional, more comfortable, this is something in which will not fix that need. Meanwhile, if there's some people who want to try to satisfy an itch for something different, something new, and something strange, I think that Twin Peaks will most certainly offer that. And to note again, from what a lot of the cast members and individuals involved said, it seems that there was a point of stagnation that was happening in media that Twin Peaks ended up offering that newness. And for some people, it did fly over their heads, but for a lot of people, it really stuck.
I also will say, to remove some of those cushions under my high seat right now, I am someone who, when I watch The Sopranos for the first time, and so far the only time, I'll probably see it again someday, but when I watched The Sopranos with my friend, I had a really tough time following it. I had a really tough time keeping track of all the characters in The Sopranos. And I think it's, for me, the thing that makes Twin Peaks easy to follow is that they're very dramatic characters. Like, I'm not going to get Nadine confused with her storyline versus like Audrey. Like, they're just such different characters in terms of not just like their storylines, but their clothing, their personalities, their, like, even their music is certain associations.
The age is something notable too.
The age. Well, that goes into appearances.
Yeah.
But I generally just don't get, okay, for that matter, I wouldn't get Audrey and Donna mixed up.
There we go. That's
James and Bobby. I know names maybe get confused, but I know who they are when they're on screen. I'm not like getting them mixed up because they're different people.
Now, we also have to question this on, like, we are in the modern day of like watching this in binge-worthy content, and this is like what, close to back 40 episodes that we experienced.
But also, with our podcasting, we still had a break a lot of times between our episode viewing.
We did have to have a break, but just imagine like sometimes like month-long breaks or like half a year-long breaks.
Then you call the Lucy hotline, you get the information you need. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
We've talked a lot over the time about David Lynch's need for control. It's one of the things that's come up a lot in researching for the movies we've talked about so far. And I thought what Mark Frost said about control was pretty interesting.
Okay.
So he said, quote, "We were given an unprecedented level of control. That was the ground rules that we wanted to agree to before we started." And he kind of said that, like, he was telling the network to take your control issues and back away.
Yeah, it seems like the studio was like all good with everything. It's just the network was the thing that.
Well, they kind of owned they were the studio pretty much.
Mark Frost did make a comment.
It was Mark Frost Productions.
It was Mark Frost Productions, but still, that is a studio run by other individuals.
Yeah.
In which he said the studio was still okay with.
Yeah.
So that means that there were other heads, other people that worked alongside them and said that's fine.
And basically he thinks that they were desperate enough that they took the offer that they normally wouldn't have. And they caught them on that day, and because of that, they managed to wrangle a lot of control. And I think that, again, David Lynch had so much control, and Mark Frost did too, but the thing they didn't have control over ultimately, that they had that pressure, was the reveal of Laura Palmer's killer. Otherwise, I think Twin Peaks didn't have to buckle that much to pressure. I don't know. David Lynch, I feel like if there's something else that they had to cave on, I think David Lynch would complain about it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like David Lynch would bring it up. But I don't know of anything else off the top of my head that the network made them change. Other than the Laura Palmer part.
It is just something that is so titanic to them that everything is dwarfed in comparison, not even need to be brought up, because that's just another snowball. Example being like the requirements of like the European
ending, right? Don't even talk about the darkness.
Or there may have just been very limited issues, like that, not as much to worry about, because at that point they were even starting to go their separate ways past the Laura Palmer situation.
And there's a certain cynicism out of Mark Frost in this interview where he mourns the idea or dreads the idea, if Twin Peaks had been made later on in like the early 2000s, what he thought might have happened to it, that he wouldn't have been able to create the same kind of show.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you would say that is still the case now. When they brought the Twin Peaks back for the return, they did it on Showtime. They did do it on cable TV. So I almost wonder if that's part of their want for control. Showtime was able to give them more control over what they were doing than, say, ABC or NBC now. And, you know, he talks about how they didn't align themselves with, as he called them, one of the powerful television producing factories. So it's sort of a mechanism in which things are just churned out. Twin Peaks wasn't like that. And we got more context on that alternate ending we were talking about, where that was pressure from their foreign distributor. And the only reason they went with the foreign distributor, again, is for control. They were able to cut costs and make it more manageable if they chose that foreign distributor. And one of the stipulations of that agreement is, we want to sell this as a standalone movie in Europe. Tack on an ending for our version, please. Which, again, is an interesting thought. And out of that limitation, out of that confrontation, out of that whatever-tation you want to call it, we got the Red Room. Which I'm happy about.
I'm happy too.
Praise be to the Europeans.
I don't think that there's anyone that sort of walks away from like Twin Peaks not like remembering the Red Room. It is such a heavily is visceral the right word? Like, it is a heavily visceral sort of like image that just sticks out. That's, again, wholly unique from anything that you really even just generally see.
And it's not even that, it's like pretty simple. The idea.
It is.
Takes a common floor pattern, a common color of curtain. And
chevron, black, white, and then red. But there's something like striking working with these like differences with these colors. And with this sort of like very heavy absence with just a limited furniture inside the room that just makes you kind of like, you can easily visualize it in your head and could probably sketch it over.
I can hear it.
You can hear it. Under those sycamore trees.
Under the sycamore trees. Also of note is Frost spoke pretty openly about his thought process regarding the season 1 finale, which I thought was pretty funny. So he said, quote, "Well, I had two objectives in mind when I wrote the last episode of the first season." Because again, Frost was the writer for that last episode of the first season.
Yes.
One was, he said, create as many cliffhangers as humanly possible within a 43-minute story. On one hand, to kind of upset and play with the convention that the nighttime soap had fallen into at that point. And number two, to extort ABC to bring us back for a second season.
Yep.
So that then they would get all the answers to those questions and unresolved stories that we left hanging.
Yes.
And then it was just a question of making that work stylistically. I think that's interesting for a couple reasons. So one is that, and they kind of go together. One is that the season 1 ending, if the series like had actually ended after one season, if it had been a limited run of like the pilot and 6 episodes and was done, how completely unsatisfying that would be in terms of closure, that it ends with Dale Cooper getting shot and roll to credits and we're done. If that was all of Twin Peaks, if that was the last thing with Twin Peaks. And then the thing that I find also interesting alongside that is thinking about the season 2 finale, which David Lynch had written. And, you know, the question kind of lingering, you know, was David Lynch also trying to do the same thing? Was he also trying to extort another season out of ABC?
Well, it's the questions that do get proposed and people might want answers for. Obviously, there was one answer that would not they would not want to pass, and David Lynch wanted to almost add more questions from the sound of it. So maybe some things would have been solved along the way, and maybe there could be that little bit of intention to just like try to lead people on to get them more and more intrigued. I'm hesitant to say completely, though.
And like, while both the season 1 and season 2 finale are ambiguous, open-ended, they don't resolve all the plot lines, and both leave Dale Cooper in a perilous position of danger, I think season 2 is a much better ending of a series. Now, obviously, there's more time in season 2 to develop things, but I think what's interesting is that the season 1 ending had wrapped up quite a few of the stories. The main mystery would have been, Dale Cooper. I think Audrey at this point had been in perilous circumstances as well.
Okay.
She was also the one in the One-Eyed Jacks at that time.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that would have felt like an unfinished show. Whereas the season 2 ending, and again, this is maybe just my own bias because I love the season 2 ending.
Yeah.
I feel like rather than just being an unfinished ending, it feels like it's going out of its way to blow things up. Like,
Yes.
It is making mysteries and unresolved endings that didn't need to be there. It's going out of its way to shoot closure in the face.
It's almost as if I would even argue that there's a lot. There's obviously like simple questions like, did these people survive? But I do think that it's almost pushing away from questionable conventions and more so focuses on just destruction.
And
it's almost as
I
if it is
respect
tearing
that.
things apart.
I think that the season 1 ending, if that had been all of Twin Peaks, that'd be a pretty lame ending in my opinion.
It'd be like a simple few thoughts here and there, and like there could be points of speculation for people, but I do think that would have been unsatisfying as well.
I like the episode as a season 1 finale, but as a series finale, not so much. Season 2, and again, I just want to make this clear because I love seasons 2 finale, and I don't want to be ambiguous about what the difference is because they have things in common.
Mm-hmm.
But still a good episode. Still a good episode.
I keep getting caught whether or not I should make the reference how's or where's Annie. I keep mixing up the questions. So I'm just
it's
gonna
how's Annie.
I'm just gonna stick with no. We're not gonna do that anymore. I'm just gonna go with what's Annie. What's
no,
Annie?
No,
What's Annie?
How's Annie?
What's Annie? When's Annie?
When is Annie? That's a fair.
When's
That's
Annie?
actually probably a fair question at this point because in Fire Walkaby, she was doing a little bit of teleporting, time porting. Hey, you know what I want to teleport through right now? An interactive grid.
Oh, okay. So, listener, I want to propose firsthand that the idea that they went with,
Professor, I don't think we've known each other long enough to propose. You might want to, take it steady for a little bit longer.
Every listener, I'm hoping, will say I do. And then we can just be a big old happy family, podcast and all. Welcome to the cult of the professor. I shall welcome you all into my loving arms as long as wedding gifts are abound. Anyway.
Oh, you would look like a cult leader in a white robe. I'm looking at you right now, and I'm thinking if you could like pull a Jared Leto.
Anyway, the grid itself.
Disc 7.
Disc 7. I like where they're going with it because by spoken word, it sounds like a fun idea. Now,
this is something that kind of needs to be seen to be believed, but we'll do our best to verbally explain this grid.
This is a grid for interviews, okay? You have a list of individuals, and there's a lot of people that get interviewed.
Like over a dozen.
And there are 3 different sections of their divided interview that goes into the origins.
How they got in the show.
The production, the show.
Yeah.
And the legacy going forward. So separating each piece of this and you just wanting to hear those specific points for each of these individual actors, I understand where, like, sitting inside of a room, that sounds like a fun idea to, like, separate those and give people the freedom of choice. When you actually see it, it looks like a horrifying, like, little game of, like, Battleship done in the cyberpunk
along the
way.
y-axis are all the different actors, and along the x-axis to the right of the actor's, like, picture and name
you got the wrong axes.
The origin, production, and legacy.
X-axis are the actors, y-axis are the production, legacy, and so on. Up, down is Y.
That's what I said.
Right.
The Y is the actors.
No, the X is the actors.
No, because they're going up and down. The actors are up and down.
But their grids are going from side to side. You choose their options going horizontal, not vertical.
Anyway,
In
whatever.
any case,
It doesn't matter.
This is why specifically
unnecessarily
there is
complicated.
a help option
There's
on
a help
the grid.
option.
There's in capital letters HELP on the upper right-hand corner
if
of
you're making
this grid.
special features for a DVD and your layout is so confusing, you have to offer a help button.
Maybe there's something we gotta question with the design of it. I know it's the future, guys. I know that there's possibilities that we can.
Yeah.
It's just after the dust settles.
And I don't know for sure, but I suspect that this was a feature on a season 2 DVD quite a while ago. The interviews are maybe like early 2000s, not that much later. They're not like recent. The main thing that tips me off, though, is that these seem to be made around the same time as like a different set of director interviews. Like it's a similar like greenish lighting on the people. I don't know how to explain it. And those interviews only talk about season 2. Like they only have like, say Tim Hunter, director of these episodes, but it only shows the season 2 episodes they directed, even if they also directed a season 1 episode.
Now, mind you, the crew and the cast, they have separate things. The cast are the ones that get the grid.
Yeah.
The crew members are the ones that get like their names, and you just
and they're
press the
about
play
as
all
long.
button.
That's the thing. Like they're not very long interviews. None of these.
Yep.
And like even when you add the origin, production, and legacy, you don't spend that much time with each of these actors.
Whoever made this grid, I thank you, because it's it may not be for the reasons you may have expected at first, and this does look like the fun option, but there's just an enjoyable absurdity to open up this menu and just seeing all these dots of options that you're trying to like calculate where they are instead of pressing the play all button. So it's easier for like you or I to go back to a specific part to reference something, sure. But for the average owner of the Twin Peaks
it's not
sets,
practical. If you're impractical and doing a weird podcast, sure. But if you're practical,
this was the setup for everyone to do podcasts.
yes. So first person featured is Kyle Mclaughlin, right? Special Agent Dale Cooper, and he talks about his experiences with Dune when he first met David Lynch. He said he found him charming and friendly, but Mclaughlin remembers that he would bother David Lynch all the time with questions. He would just keep asking Lynch questions because, it's his first time doing a movie. I'm sure Mclaughlin wanted to get everything right, and he's the lead character. Got to make sure that, you're not making a mistake what the director wants. And Mclaughlin would say he was good for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then he'd start doodling on a piece of paper, and I knew that I had lost him, which I find to be a very funny image.
It is a very funny image. It's this little area that almost feels contradictory to the statements that were just made.
Now, David, I have a very important series of questions to ask you today. Why, yes, Kalil, come into my office. Okay, so David, I'm kind of wondering about Paul Atreides. What are you drawing there, David?
Oh, it's me as a dolphin inside of a tuxedo.
Oh, it's a very nice drawing, David. Anyway, I was wondering about Paul Atreides. There's this scene where who's the other person there with you on the dolphin?
Oh, that actually is myself again, but this time I am a bowl of pudding. Yes, you go ahead and go with that.
Anyway, the blue space sponges. The space sponges from Dune. I just want to know, what
no, that's a great idea. I should include those.
Et cetera, et cetera. So, it does make me wonder great scenarios. It feels like an SNL skit.
Yes.
And as a response to how David Lynch would seemingly ignore him a lot of the times, Mclaughlin started developing a style when working with Lynch that he would just kind of figure it out for himself, like imagine what he thinks it should be. And it turns out that Lynch was cool with that. Partly because Lynch trusts the actors a lot, but also I think that Kyle Mclaughlin, more than almost anyone, taps into the same frequencies of Lynch. Mm-hmm. They naturally vibe.
I know. Please go on.
And he also kind of speculated that the reason why Gordon Cole is in Twin Peaks is that David Lynch so much loved the world of Twin Peaks that he just couldn't stay out of it. He had to insert himself into the world of Twin Peaks. And look, anyone who's ever written fan fiction with a self-insert OC, they understand how David Lynch felt. Gordon Cole is the self-insert OC.
Yeah, I gotta wonder if that's how that sort of came about. I know that they mention there may have been a sort of desire to be a part of that world, and that might be specifically a David Lynch style things. We've seen him make cameos inside
Smaller
of his own
cameos, yeah.
inside of his media beforehand. I'm just kind of curious since it was specifically him, and I don't think that we've seen or likely will see any sort of Mark Frost pop up and saying, "Hello, I'm."
Well, Mark Frost was in Twin Peaks.
Oh, so was he more than Fark Most?
He was just the news reporter for like a random little split moment.
Oh, I didn't.
He was on the
that.
TV. Yeah, he was like a news guy.
Okay.
It was a very small role.
I didn't realize there were more channels other than Invitation to Love. So
The Invitation to Love channel.
Yes.
That was canceled in season 2. Rest in peace. And I'm sure this brought great sadness to Shelley Johnson, because I know she was a regular watcher of Invitation to Love as a sort of form of escapism, perhaps, from Leo Johnson, her maniac husband. Maniac husband sounds like it's like a wacky adventure. I should say horrifying drug lord abusive husband. To clarify.
That's the funny part when it does come to like the interviews and when Shelley Johnson does bring up someone such as
Eric DeRay.
It's the fact that apparently he's the sweetest guy.
Yeah, he was giggling before all the shoots and throwing her off.
Yep. So, just like imagine like someone just sort of like laughing around as he's like swinging like a soap menacingly. It sometimes makes a worse image, but on the other hand, it doesn't seem like that was the case on set.
No, she wasn't actually scared of this person. Like they were friends. It sounds like they got along well. And she also, again, spoke positively about David Lynch. This time, David Lynch wasn't around, so she didn't have to say that in front of him. But she said that David Lynch, as far as he's always around. He was like putting little cards up behind the camera of what to say. No, she said that David Lynch is, quote, like an open channel to the creative forces that come down. So it's sort of a mystical explanation of his abilities. In other words, you could say that he is like one who can detect the waves of like a radio wave or like the electricity in the air. He could like feel it and receive it and then shoot that electricity out of his hand like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. That is the David Lynch story.
Yes.
Sherilyn Fenn, the actor for Audrey, has a really interesting section here too. I kind of wish there'd been more interviews of her just sprinkled throughout, because she's one of the more vocally opinionated members of the cast from what I can tell. When she doesn't like something, she makes it very, very clear. And I think that makes her one of the most kind of interesting for me to listen to, because she doesn't really mix words. She just says what's on her mind. So at first, when she got Audrey as a character, you think back to Audrey in the pilot, she's really not there that much in the pilot.
Yeah,
she becomes so much more later in season 1. But from the beginning, not as much there. So she was surprised when the character blossomed out to a stronger character later on and really liked the character of Audrey.
Yeah, as far as her agent and her were concerned, it's like, yeah, we actually were thinking about, like, instead of this character, we think that you'll be Audrey. It's like, flip, 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 flip. There is no Audrey.
Yeah, barely even in the story. But I don't know if it's... I almost want to believe if Sherilyn Fenn might have been advocating for the character behind the scenes. She never really said that she did that, but she seems like someone who might have done that. I don't know. I like to believe in a world in which Audrey became more of a thing because Sherilyn Fenn pushed for it.
Why don't you believe in, like David Lynch and Mark Frost there?
Because she wasn't that interesting of a character in the pilot. But then she became so much more. She wasn't bad in the pilot, but she wasn't, Audrey. And there was this whole debacle with the Miss Twin Peaks pageant, which I think I mentioned before in the season 2 look back, that Audrey hated that. Like the actor hated that.
Yes.
Sherilyn Fenn. And she basically just felt like strutting around in a bunch of leotards was embarrassing. Like not something she wanted to do. I don't know if it was on like feminist grounds, moral grounds, whatever. She just thought it didn't really feel right for Twin Peaks. And it also didn't feel right for Audrey. So she only had Audrey really show up to give the speech.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad she was there for the speech, because I do think the speech was a good moment for her character and for that moment in the pageant. But now that it's been brought up, yeah, she's not dancing with the others during the rehearsal or during the actual show itself. And she admits during this time that she's probably being difficult, but she says it's okay since David didn't mind. And
she also had just like interesting insights for David Lynch, in
Yes.
which like how he would end up encouraging people to go into these dark places.
Yes.
And how things like Twin Peaks, for all that it had, like the reason why it even had that staying power is that because at the bottom of it, it wasn't just random. There was at the bottom of it, there was a truth behind it.
It was soul-based, as she said, based on the soul, and not weird for the sake of being weird, which I think it was a low-key dig at other directors. She never named names, but there's this sense that she feels not every director understood that.
Yeah.
That David Lynch, of the directors of Twin Peaks, that was one she enjoyed working with the most.
Excellent.
One of the ones. That's at least how I read what she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you read it as well?
I think so. It's something that's still I'm percolating inside my head at the moment, but I think that's a fair assessment.
And it's this idea of too many cooks in the kitchen is what she was kind of worried about. She says that the reason Twin Peaks probably succeeded is because they were able to mostly stay true to that vision and not have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like almost on the opposite end of Sherilyn Fenn's like vocal, opinionated nature is Dana Ashbrook. He just seems like a casual guy. At least that's my impression of him. He was seeming like he's having a good time. Mm-hmm. The way he's talking about this, he kind of just went with the flow on the set. He brought up this weird situation with this guy squeaking his shoe on the floor to create a certain sound effect, talking about sort of the improvisational nature of Twin Peaks in the production, which reminds me. In that first interview where David Lynch was in the cafe with Machen Amek and Kyle Mclaughlin and John Wentworth, there was something in there involving kind of the idea of accidents on the set involving Bob or Frank Silva, the actor for Bob.
No, there's no accidents, Kalil. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, would you be willing to kind of elucidate that matter?
It seems that David Lynch is heavily defensive on like the ideas of like accidents that sort of happen around the set. It seems like there are a series of circumstances that come up, maybe even coincidences, especially when like there's points where he'll see like Frank sort of like working around certain points inside of the set as like humorous things are going along. He'll grab him and like put him into a different spot. And there's like this move maybe he's going forward, he's trying to evoke. But there's a point where after grabbing him and putting him into a certain spot, and after they shoot a scene with Grace Zabriskie, where she does panic, there's a point where someone does yell cut. It's like, well, it looks like overall we got like his head inside the shot.
A guy wasn't supposed to be in the reflection, but he ended up being there.
But actually David Lynch ended up having some like connection with that and decided, yes, that this is going to work. David Lynch, this still is an accident. This still was like beyond intention.
What he corrected, I'll defend David Lynch a little bit here.
Go.
What he was doing is he was saying that wasn't the first thing.
Okay.
That the first thing wasn't really an accident, that Bob had already been an idea before that point.
Okay.
Because this was a scene, wasn't a scene in the show, but it was a scene in real life where Frank Silva had accidentally gotten like locked in like a little room on the set, and someone made a comment about it, and David Lynch heard that idea of Frank Silva being like locked in someplace, and that sprang forth the idea of, wait, Frank Silva in the Laura Palmer room. It gave him an idea. I wouldn't call that a set accident the way that like someone was accidentally in a frame they weren't supposed to be in. Mm-hmm. It was just an off-screen thing, made him think about it, and he wrote it in. So like the idea of Frank Silva being Bob was pre-planned, sort of. Definitely like semi-improvised because of a set thing that happened. But I think David Lynch's reaction of saying, no, it wasn't the mirror thing first.
Okay.
I think that's what he was getting at.
Okay.
He was very direct about it.
Yes.
David Lynch, again, an absolute man.
He
not in the sense that he's like,
what does that mean?
He's
Kalil?
an absolutist. I didn't mean it like he's absolutely, it's not like a body spray scent. I mean like, I'm just saying that he is someone who believes in absolutes. Yeah.
But.
So, going back to the interview at hand.
With a lack of absolutes, I do find that Dana Ashbrook's sort of like going into this environment, say, for example, situations similar to David Lynch, similar to this, on those squeaky floors, on those
squeaky
points
shoes.
Yes. That the rules were just sort of out the door, as he put it.
Yep.
And that sort of environment, again, seems to be somewhat of a rarity, if you will.
I also thought it was interesting that Dana Ashbrook, thought that they might go with the Audrey-Bobby relationship.
I think
like he didn't know what they were doing, so he wasn't sure if they were going to do it or not.
I think that as far as like him just sort of like being on set seemed to just be like a series of visceral experiences for him. Like when he was like brought in, and turns out he actually was like knew Eric DeRay during the time.
Yep.
Isn't that funny? Bobby and Leo knowing each other beforehand,
right?
Being cast together. But regardless, being brought into this environment and being brought before like David Lynch as well as Mark Frost in this like serious little interview, and even being noted that, hey, honestly, like as far as this goes, Bobby doesn't really smile. He doesn't really even smile. It's like, I'll never smile again. I'm good.
Yeah.
So,
you could tell he just wanted the role.
He just really wanted the role, and I do. I think that there is like that lack of smiley Bobby that happens throughout, but when he can like branch out and get a little bit of that cockiness emotion in, I think that's where Bobby shines.
I think that original idea that Bobby doesn't smile, this was mentioned in the interview, just to clarify, that when he got the role, he was told Bobby doesn't smile. And I think he said David Lynch had said that. That is interesting because Bobby definitely does smile. I just think that the earlier idea of Bobby from like the pilot and from the first season in general, he doesn't open up until later.
Yes.
That the original Bobby wasn't someone who would show the smiling. But when you get into season 2, when you start developing things between him and Shelley, and later with even Audrey, you do see different sides, even a tender side with his father.
I would say that even like points all the way to the movie, if you will, Fire Walk With Me, I think the most memorable part someone can take from Dana's performances is when like Laura is trying to change and manipulate him, and then he just like turns around his mood and emotions and is like dancing backwards, getting into
Toward
the
the
mood
school, right? And early
music.
on,
Yep. Kisses that sweet little portrait, and there's a lot of fun that can go into a performance, even when it has to be more serious at times.
I also liked how the grid and positioning here had Gary Hirschberger right after Dana Ashbrook.
For whatever reason,
the actor for Mike Nelson. So we all know the reason. I thought that was a really good, just, kind of natural order here. We don't see a lot of Gary Hirschberger in the interview, so I was glad to have some of that.
No, I'm glad that we see Gary. I still kind of wish that we did see some Eric DeRay, but still, regardless, I'm glad to see a really good standout performance throughout season 2.
I also thought it was really funny that Gary Hirschberger thought he was auditioning for the person he called the Weepy Sheriff. And it's like when they were making this interview and like post-production, they realized that it's not clear who he's talking about. He never says the name. So they just put the picture of Andy on the screen. When he says the Weepy Sheriff, they put Andy on the screen to clarify. He thought he was auditioning for Andy.
And to clarify to listeners who are similar to myself and are very bad with like names to faces, this would be the actor that would be Snake.
Yes.
If you will. So just imagine Snake.
Oh, so you're saying people wouldn't know Mike Nelson?
I'm saying that I have a hard time with names.
So you know him as Snake more than Mike Nelson?
I know him as Snake more than Mike Nelson.
That's interesting. Okay.
Regardless, Snake, Mike Nelson, Gary, however he wanted to put forward, was trying to put him in a position for Andy. And I kind of want to see him in that more goofy sort of spotlight. But at the same time, I think that he does come off well as the...
I think it's just the fact that I wouldn't want Andy recast.
Yeah.
I think Andy is so clearly fit for the role.
I think that,
Andy is Andy. His name's not Andy, but you know what I mean.
I think that there were some of the most interesting insights throughout the interviews with Gary, especially whenever it comes to like describing David Lynch as a gentleman. And not to mention that, but when he goes into like how he's like trying to communicate to you, it gets a little bit wild.
So there's that scene early on with Mike and Bobby at the jail, at the sheriff's jail, and they're barking at James in the prison cells, right? Well, the way that David Lynch tried to explain that to Gary Hirschberger was something along the lines of like he like walked up to him and he asked, have you ever been to a zoo before? And Gary Hirschberger's like, yeah. You ever been to see the monkeys? Yeah, probably. You ever heard the monkeys barking? No. But I think I understand the idea. I just like this sort of gradual process of, you ever been to a zoo before? As kind of a lead-in is very interesting. I never would have thought monkeys in the cell. I've always thought of like barking like a dog. But the monkey barking thing is interesting.
The Marquis of the Monkeys.
The Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Speaking of something really funky.
James Marshall.
Honestly,
AKA James Hurley.
Here's the thing. Here's the absolute ordeal. Myself and Kalil have gone back and forth against like
mostly against James.
James
as
Marshall.
a character.
Like as far as like James Hurley, as far as the character goes, it's been constantly like focusing on that sort of like what he's been given.
Right. We mostly criticize the writing.
Yes. I gotta say is that this whole entire amount of energy through this interview of James Marshall blew me away.
It is more energy than he probably had for half of season 2 combined.
There is an ecstaticness and there is a passion that I see with this person that I would thoroughly want to see him in other things. Like this is an actor that gets me excited just to see how engaged he gets, especially in a role such as James Hurley. So genuinely, that's just very exciting.
And this is another one, too, where if it hadn't been for the casting agent, he might not have been in the show.
Yeah.
Because by his own admission, he's not very good at headshots for, like, photos. And apparently the photo headshot that David Lynch had received was enough that Lynch looked at the picture and was like, no, not this guy. Enough times that he just had to keep being advocated for. But then when Lynch actually met him, he's like, oh, you don't look like your picture. And then they got along just fine and he got the role.
Lynch tends to cast on feel is what we kind of get out of this interview.
Yeah, we haven't explicitly stated it, but they didn't do normal interviews in the sense of like auditions. For the most part, it sounds like, especially the pilot actors, the ones from the very beginning of the series, they were brought in and had a conversation. It wasn't like they went up there and they performed those characters all the time. So oftentimes it just was an initial sit down with Mark Frost and David Lynch and just see what your personality is like.
Yeah. And another sort of highlight with David Lynch's directing style, or at the very least on James Marshall's account, there's just a point in which like he's having this hard time just like trying to push an overall scene, if you will, and like David Lynch apparently could tell he was getting frustrated. So basically David Lynch just kind of like goes up to James and kind of like squats close to him and ends up doing something very similar apparently to that suitcase scene in Eraserhead, like where that person, like the actor was trying to constantly pull the suitcase out and just like took so much time and just like was in this weird position for so long that apparently it's just like lightened the mood all around between the crew members, that after that instance and David Lynch just sort of is like, okay, go for it. The scene went amazingly. So
I like to believe that was not his intent.
Yeah.
I like to believe David Lynch was trying to communicate something specific, but everyone else just took it as a lighthearted comedy moment.
Yes.
I don't know. Either way, it worked.
Either way, it works. Again, like from the way that he describes this and just the way that he sort of speaks, honestly, I'd love to work with David. That's not David Lynch. Maybe David Lynch, but James
Marshall.
Yes.
It was James Hurley.
It was James Hurley. That's the thing that trips me up.
Well, one that you probably may recognize as being different than their character is David Duchovny.
Yeah.
Playing the character in Twin Peaks of DEA agent Bryson.
Yeah.
Who, for most of Twin Peaks season 2, when we see this character, they are presenting in feminine attire with the feminine hair. And we went back and forth throughout watching it, whether or not to classify this character as transgender, a crossdresser, ambiguous gender usage here. Duchovny specifically refers to the character as a transvestite, which is a term that obviously has fallen out of usage. So at least for what I can tell, I think Duchovny viewed the character as transgender, not a man wearing woman's clothing, but someone who identifies as a woman.
In the perspective of the time, it feels like this interview, I would say, is probably the most uncomfortable for me.
And that's also because this character carries those potential connotations.
The character does, and it does seem that it's not too much separated from like potential viewpoints again of the time from this individual actor. So
it was played a little bit for laughs when the interview, like the way he refers to it, he brings up more almost the comedy of being this type of character.
He ended up saying that his audition, if I'm not mistaken, was something more comical, and he then sort of like takes the situation and like dials back the comedy to be more serious because from his words, he thinks that brings out more of the humor in this situation, in which I think that it's more important to bring out the human.
And this is the tough part about, I think, Denise Bryson as a character, is that it is neither black nor white, in the sense that I don't think it is a fully positive or fully realized portrayal of a transgender character. I think that the reactions of characters like Hawk especially, they play toward a sort of comedy almost. At least for my viewing, everyone's different. If you viewed this character and thought there was nothing at all bad with it at all, that's perfectly fine. For me, though, I felt like some of the characters were playing it off like a joke in the show, and I couldn't tell if I was meant to find it funny. I didn't find it funny, but I couldn't tell if the show was trying to get me to think it's funny. And if I think of the average person watching TV in like 1990, 1991, seeing this on TV, it honestly might have felt like another weird character in Twin Peaks. Because the show has characters like Nadine, who it plays for laughs a lot of times, even when it maybe shouldn't. Because Nadine is another complicated case, because Nadine is played as a comedy character, a B-plot for most of season 2, but she is one of the most tragic plot lines in the whole entire series.
Absolutely.
And her character is full of sadness and pain that's real, and the town just kind of shrugs and says, we're going to play pretend and let her go to high school again.
I think that, again, I do enjoy... There are points of absurdity which I do question and I do criticize whenever it comes to either characters, but I still think it is heavily important to have like bits of comedy with tragedy.
And that's the hard part
to...
is I don't want to wave my finger and say everything's problematic when that's part of the charm in of itself is the willingness to be silly, to be a little irreverent. It's just, is it being silly or irreverent at anyone's expense?
Yes.
We're both big fans, and we talk a lot about in our channel, of the series Revolutionary Girl Utsuna. And that's a show that makes jokes and light of very serious characters and very serious personal situations.
Yes.
There's characters who start off as like physically abusive jerk boyfriends, like the most archetypal, like chauvinistic, toxic male you can find. But as the series goes on, they start becoming a joke character, and we both find them funny.
Not only
we both find him funny, despite the fact that at the same time, we are aware if this was a real person, they'd be horrible.
But again, there goes...
to how they behave to women.
But again, going into that, obviously I'd say that we're most likely referencing Saionji.
Oh, of course.
And he's not only a joke character, but again, it's mixing comedy with tragedy.
It's willing to look at characters as three-dimensional.
Yes, it's willing to look around these characters, what they are about, what they are willing to do, and not only play with the humor of them, but also play with the overall problems with them as well.
I feel like with Denise and with Nadine, you know, obviously Nadine is more of the mental health side, same with Johnny. And then also with Denise, we have a character who is representing a very marginalized group, especially within the 90s. Mm-hmm. You know, people who were transgender far more likely to be victims of crime and violence, be the victims of those situations.
Yes.
And not really having a public voice. Denise Bryson was one of the first transgender characters a lot of people would have experienced.
Very much
And
so.
for like a young transgender person or someone who hadn't yet awakened to their identity, is Denise Bryson a good portrayal? Yes and no. And I don't think it's black and white.
There's also that question right there. I think that also brings up a good idea. Using, again, Saionji...
And if you don't know the show, that's fine.
That's fine.
It's just the most stereotypical toxic male you can think of.
Yes.
Copy and paste, you got the idea.
Yes. A lot of it, again, is the problems with himself. Meanwhile, these other issues that are coming with characters, which can be pointed to criticism, are like problems with the society around. For one end, I don't think Nadine is getting the proper help that she really needs. I think that there are some issues with the treatment, but that's just how things usually go whenever it comes to Jacoby in the field. Yeah. And there's also the overall problems that come with the environment for those who are sort of like in a different commonality of identity, if you will, similar to how a person such as Denise Bryson would be in the world that we would know around the 90s when Twin Peaks was around. So, yes, it is most certainly complicated.
Yeah, and I just want to say, because we talk about these characters a lot, I just want to say unequivocally, like, again, we are both in favor of seeing more characters in fiction that are nuanced and fully fleshed out characters from a variety of backgrounds. We want to see more characters from groups that we normally don't see on TV.
Yes.
The fact that they had a very prominent Native American character in the form of Hawk is really good.
Yes.
And Denise Bryson, for all the elements we might find a little bit unsure about and maybe get a little nervous about, I'm glad that there was a transgender character on the show at all, and that was a rather bold move at the time. Unfortunately, it's bold. I wish it was normal, but I just want to say unequivocally, like, we are in favor of seeing characters from these backgrounds because that's real for a lot of people. That's their lives. And I want to see media that's reflective of real people and representing them.
Yes.
So we just want to see media get better over time. And I think culturally, we've moved past where Twin Peaks was with Denise.
Yes.
So I think that at the time, it was pretty progressive, but now we're looking back. There's things that could have been better. And Nadine is a whole can of worms in that regard because Nadine's one of my favorite characters from season 2. But I say that knowing that if this was a real person, like, really tragic portrayal of mental health in terms of her honestly being a victim in a lot of the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But Anyway, back to the interview here. Duchovny reveals that the role of Denise Bryson had originally been written for another actor named James Spader. And Duchovny only got really that role because he was so desperate to act. He wasn't even really a big Twin Peaks fan, he said. He just wanted a role really, really badly. And that is what he found with Denise. And it was his first time he'd ever done drag before for a role. And when he auditioned, he originally says he did it in a more stereotypical, like, feminine voice, trying to play into the sort of feminine character. But as they worked on him with the show, as they worked on his hair, clothing, I say he for the actor, he took on a more less is more approach.
Yes.
Where when he did the vocals and mannerisms, he did not play into the feminine as much. Which, again, I don't think it's good or bad that he did it that way. I think there's both. Because he kind of made it seem like that'd be funnier to him if he didn't play into too feminine. Like, there was something to him that I think he thought it would be more effective in a comedy way to be more masculine while wearing the women's clothing. I find that to be kind of uncomfortable to make it a comedy character. But also, what was he being told this character was? Was Denise Bryson meant to be a comedy character? I don't know what they were trying to do.
Again, it's not to say that people cannot, like, act in a way that can find humor in things.
You can have a comedy character as transgender. Again, it's just, are you making fun of that aspect of their personality in life? Are you making fun of their status as a transgender person, who they are, or are you just making a transgender character funny? And that line is hard to draw. Now, I know that you're not always the best with, like, remembering faces and voices of actors to their characters. My guess would be, out of all of the actors, the one you'd probably have the best chance of recognizing right away would be Kimmy Robertson as Lucy Moran, because of her voice. Because her voice in real life is very similar to the voice we hear for Lucy.
I think it's because there's not many voices similar in Twin Peaks to it, and she has retained that.
So you
sort
could
of
tell
candor.
it was her, right?
I could tell it was her.
Good. Not that it's bad if you don't.
It sounds like you're trying to give me a trophy for, like,
I'm
actually
sorry.
accomplishing
I don't
this.
mean to do it that way to you. But no, I think it is notable that she is one of the most immediately recognizable, like, iconic faces and voices of Twin Peaks. And I also really enjoyed her sense of humor in the interview. She, like, compared meeting Frost and Lynch in this sort of dark room with them at this table, and there's a light hanging above over it, and she compared it to, like, a conspiracy meeting.
Yeah, and the fact that inside of this, like, instance, like, instead of, like, being very focused and just, like, trying to heavily push herself into the interview and just, like, try to step around glass to make sure that, like, nothing goes wrong with it, she just went all in ham to make sure that she could ask as many questions as her and her friends would ever want from David Lynch.
Which,
because
good for her.
This was her opportunity.
Good for you, Kimmy Robertson.
Yeah, no, she saw an opportunity and she took it.
Also, her wording, she's describing, like, she loved working with David Lynch because he'd work with you and he would quote, kind of like, how do you do a Lucy voice?
I don't know. It's a Lucy sound. It's a series of Lucy's.
I'll try. Okay. And quote, kind of like reach his arm into your mouth and down into your stomach and pull out a scene. Oh, here it is. It's all slimy. That's my attempt at a Lucy voice.
Yeah, so yeah,
I can't do it justice.
It's fine. There's a lot more quickness to it, I would say, and especially on, like, how she's, like, trying to describe, like, going deep into it, pulling it out. I was like, okay, well, we're all slimy, but we're gonna work with this.
I love that analogy.
It is
of someone reaching into your mouth and grabbing something from your stomach.
It sounds like someone who has checked out David Lynch's prior works before. And is very ecstatic about it. And
also, I like the, I never thought about it, but the element of Miss Twin Peaks, the pageant where...
Yeah, she's told, like, yeah, you know what, you're talented, let's, like, show that talent, if you will. And she's actually approached by it, so she prepares a routine inside the background and gets that all sorts of ready, plays it, I forget the name of the music she prepares it from, something called McKnife, I don't know. Maybe I'll make something called McKnife, and then we'll pretend it's that.
Sequel to Macbeth.
Yes. McKnife.
It's like when he cuts one of his arms off and it's a blade now.
Okay, you do know the ending of Macbeth, right?
I'm assuming everyone dies. Knowing Shakespeare.
Knowing Shakespeare.
Look, I've read Hamlet, I haven't read Macbeth, okay? Sue me.
Okay, very well. Lawsuit will be coming soon to a theater near you. Anyway, she's preparing this, and she gets ready to show it off, and she's going to perform it in front of everyone. And apparently the crew members kind of like, ooh, at the point where she like slams down and does the splits, because everyone in their mindset is thinking, what about the baby?
I didn't even think about it, and we should have said something that Lucy's pregnant when she does the splits.
I can't recall if we did say anything.
No,
lately.
I don't think we did.
Very well. I guess we didn't. But the fact is that, like, apparently Lucy got so many comments afterwards, like, from, like, fans or anyone. It's like, but what about the baby? And apparently she just kept on changing the answer for that because...
Lucy has a steel uterus.
A uterus of steel.
It's the same thing.
It's not. It is not.
How is it different? Please explain to me.
Because there's more drama in a uterus of steel. There's passion and there's emotion behind it. A steel uterus, you're not the doctor implanting it into Lucy, okay?
Okay, fine. Again, a lot of great interviews, a lot of character interviews. I'm appreciating it, even if the grid is very confusing. If I had to pick a favorite, if you were to point a steel uterus at my head. Never mind. If you were to, moving on from that, Dawn Davis interview. Definitely my favorite, if I had to pick one. This is the interview for the actor who plays Major Garland Briggs, who very, very sadly passed away, I don't know how many years later, but before the return for Twin Peaks. And Dawn Davis, I haven't ever seen him in an interview before. It's the only interview I've seen him in. Just seems like the funnest person to just talk to. Like, he just seems like a cool guy. I don't know outside this interview, but I really good, strong first impression. And hearing his voice talking casually, it's not as like formal with the vocabulary like Major Briggs, but he's still got that deep register that's so powerful.
Now, I will tell you right now, Kalil, there's some additional content that I think you'll appreciate him even more, but that's going to come into the later third part of this overall podcast. Yes, there's going to be 3 whole parts to this, but you'll have to stay tuned for whenever we get to the rest of those sweet, sweet special features, minus one of them. So, no, it seems like there is a very comfortable candor from this man, not only from like the register of his voice, but also the way that he's even just sort of like thinking back. It's just a heavily comfortable atmosphere all throughout. Even kind of going into the evening audition and just like formally making sure to answer all the questions and just getting into like conversations about fishing.
Yeah, I love
David
the
Lynch.
fact that their conversation interview revolved around Dawn Davis growing up in the Ozark Mountains, and then Lynch asking about fishing, talking about fishing for a while, and then the only question that was left like, hey, can you cry on camera? Okay, cool. I really enjoy that's how it went.
It's heavily wholesome.
Very heavily wholesome. And the idea that fishing factored in, I think, is super interesting, considering that the character of Major Briggs does fish.
Yes.
And also Lynch had asked if he's in the military, and Dawn Davis had said that, yes, he had served as a captain before. So, again, there's some overlap between the actor and character in this situation. Best part of it, though. I love all this candor. It's great. Best part of it, though, is what he recalls about the scene with Wyndham Earle when he's struck with that dart. Okay, that scene with Wyndham Earle. And Dawn Davis recalls that he, prior to that scene, had been fed a Mexican lunch. And this Mexican lunch had included refried beans. He loved it. Really good lunch. But, as you may have already expected kind of going into this conversation, when he fell over in that scene, quoting Dawn Davis here, an elephant wouldn't have broken wind any louder than I did. Thank God my poop don't stink. Or whatever. But there was a young girl working the PA, assisting the props master, and she was a few feet from me. And she'd been very friendly up to that point. From that point on, she hated me. She wouldn't smile at me. She'd probably turn and walk away anytime I came toward her. I've never forgotten that. It's like losing a nice relative, all because of a fart. It's such a powerful moment. All these interviews play out like they're interesting moments in the interviews, but most of them are like, oh yeah, I wanted a job really bad for the script and I auditioned and it was really cool. David Lynch is so fun to work with. And, we had a lot of improvisational on the set. And I think the legacy of Twin Peaks is that it was such a unique and visionary show. And then you have Dawn Davis in here letting it rip. and I got to appreciate it.
I cannot add anything to any of this.
No,
I could try my best to dissect it. I could try my best to take pieces of this, and I could try to like mock certain things, such as like whether or not someone could like actually know what their farts smell like if they were an expert on that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's anything that would make anyone satisfied more than your intensity into this man's farts.
I
and
love
the
that.
people it's
Well,
impacting.
I'm just trying to do a pale imitation of his intensity.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
He does such a great job delivering this.
I leave the floor to the both of you. Kudos.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. I'm just going to move on then because I think it speaks for itself. We heard from Mary Jo Deschanel, who plays Eileen Hayward in the series. And we'll later hear in the director's side, her husband, Caleb Deschanel. Mm-hmm. But regarding Eileen Hayward, she would talk about situations where she'd be like in the wheelchair and people didn't know like she could actually walk. So she would start walking and people, similar to the baby thing with Lucy, would be very confused.
Like stand up from the like wheelchair
Yep.
or anything like that.
And as far as why Eileen is in a wheelchair, she had been told from her memory that Eileen had been in a car accident. However, it wasn't really clear from any of the directors and writers that she spoke to, including, it sounds like, Frost and Lynch, it wasn't clear if the need for the wheelchair was physical or psychological. Mm-hmm. It's something I actually never thought about before this interview. Because Eileen is such a small-time character in a lot of the episodes who doesn't really start to show up as much until the end of season 2.
There's not much that really is covered with Eileen, so it's not something that I think is outright to be questioned.
But I do think it's a very interesting thought.
It's an interesting thought. I suppose that it's still not one that I'm compelled to even ask, just because, again, the lack of like time that we've been around her. But on the same token, is this something that if we explored, do I see someone like writing about in the lore of Twin Peaks? Yeah.
But I also kind of just was cool with just, oh, this person's in a wheelchair. I didn't want to like question it. Like I didn't feel like it needed to be explained. People can just be in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
That's a normal thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I also don't think it needs a backstory either. I just thought it was an interesting thought if it was psychological, because how many other characters in this story have psychological things going on with their characters that
all
are
of them.
hang-ups? And also going back to that deleted scene where we got Dr. Jacoby speculating that Johnny's conditions are psychological and thus possibly malleable. There's good and bad. We talked about it at length then, so I won't drudge it up right now. There's good and bad to that sort of approach. I think there's something fine just about the idea that this woman's in a wheelchair. It doesn't matter why. That's not really that important. Mm-hmm. Just move on with the rest of her character. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting as a conversation topic.
Yep.
Really excited that we heard from Lenny Von Dolan, the actor for Harold Smith, with white hair, which in the Twin Peaks universe is so ominous. Seeing Harold with white hair was spooky.
Lenny looks great.
Oh, he looks great.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of just Harold in general and his performance. I've spoken before about, from what I'd read, that he really connected to the character, and I felt that in the interview. There's a certain, like, commitment to his character that even years later I still get that sense seeing him in an interview. That's one actor I'd be really interested to experience more of his work, because I don't know what else he's been in, but that'd be interesting to see more of him.
I enjoy his like reminiscing on the "I'll be here" moment, which we've spoken about before.
I think it was a great ad lib.
Yeah,
it was a great ad lib.
I believe so as well. And the thing is that he knew that Harold would meet his demise, so as he puts it, he knew where the bookends were with the characters.
He created this sphere of a character to dwell in while it was still there.
Yes.
And when he saw the script saying that Harold would be found left hanging in a future episode, he called David Lynch and left this long, rambling message on David Lynch's answer machine.
And from the sounds of it, it was like in the middle of the sleepy times, like in which like, people are just like being asleep.
It reached him too late.
It reached him too late. It was like, Lenny, never come up with a good idea a day before the shoot.
Yeah, and it was this whole, he wanted to send off Harold in a more poetic, personal way than maybe how it actually happened.
Mm-hmm. The sound, a light sound going off inside of the background.
And I don't know what's better, because I think the ideas that he espoused in this, at least what he remembers of this phone message, it was more personal, it was more sentimental and intimate to the character.
Yeah.
But also there's something to be said that when we see Harold's death in the actual version of the show, the one that made it in, it's almost the opposite in the sense that you open up and everything's just all over the place. It's chaos, and just unceremonially, he's just hanging. It almost feels like all of that personal tenderness of Harold's character has been ripped away very violently. And it's the contrast of these two ideas that I think is interesting. One would be a very like sincere send-off to a loved character, and one is almost like painfully understated. Like, it just kind of happened, and because the show doesn't linger on Harold, we don't get anything after Harold. We just see him hanging, and I'm not sure he's ever brought up again. And the show doesn't look into him. It doesn't bring him up. It's not till Fire Walk With Me we see more of Harold.
Yep.
So the fact that his last sight we ever see of Harold is just his feet dangling without any sort of send-off to the character, there's a coldness to that that maybe is more chilling than warm, whereas I think Van Dolen's idea would have been warmer. I don't know which is better. I think both are interesting. You know what I'm saying?
I think that especially with the history of like Harold changes that we are aware of, because there have been multiple changes, I'd be very intrigued on the overall mood that would be brought up with like the intimate Harold send-off.
I'd love to see an outtake deleted scene version.
But at the same notion, I feel that there is a suddenness of what happens to Harold, and just seeing the situation that seems distinctly not Harold, that you can have speculation fly all over the place. My thing was that I did not believe that it was done by Harold. This is something of an external
And if
force.
we go by the script, it just says he's found hanging. It doesn't say why.
Yes.
So I guess one question, I know we have a lot we want to still talk about here, but I am curious. Now that time has passed with Harold and you kind of like thought about his character, and we've moved past season 2, Fire Walk With Me, The Secret Diary, do you think Harold died because of spiritual forces, Wyndham Earl, Leland, or do you think it was death by suicide? What do you think happened to Harold at the end in your interpretation?
In my interpretation, in the area of Twin Peaks, I think that like a lot of spiritual and emotional items go very hand in hand. And I do think that the connection with Harold and these mystical forces of Twin Peaks, the fainting outside the door, I do think that there is and being neighbors to like the people of the Red Room.
Right.
I do heavily feel that this is just someone that has been ran through the Red Room, or like elements of the Red Room, like a big old like pound of beef, and being just strung along to the point that his demise, I feel, is more an effect of the environment around him more than himself. Whoever physically did the action matters less than what he could even have.
Even if Harold
received.
was the one to arrange this event, you would still look at the lodge spirits or environmental factors as manipulating him.
Very much in the similar fashion that we would see from Laura Palmer or from Leland.
Even their deaths have a lot of spiritual connotations.
And I do think that it's very interesting to even explore his aspect, because we have Laura Palmer as well as Leland affected by the Red Room, but still being close with familial entities, and Harold, who just is shut away, but also reaching out over whatever small bits he can, and specifically Laura Palmer comes across him one way or another.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, let's call it notepad room for just fun speculation or deep dive material to go in with that alone, especially on just individual character analyses. Do
you like Harold a lot? I remember when we went over season 2 stuff, I remember liking Harold more than you did.
Okay.
Like, he's higher on my theoretical list of characters than I think he would have him placed. But I'm just curious, like, how much do you like Harold?
I enjoy Harold in a very specific way. It's one of those situations where you don't know, go into the character and just like whether or not it's going to be excitement. But there's a specific tone that happens whenever I think of Harold. Every time I think of like Harold, that eerie song that kind of like plays in the background, like dun dun dun, like it feels like wind chimes. Or
Harold's theme is really
vibrating.
good. It's one of my favorite tracks from the soundtrack. I think it's underrated a little bit. But
it's something that is very fitting and very haunting that Harold sticks with you.
Yeah, I love Harold's theme. It's really good.
So, and the fact that like Lenny was able to capture a lot of that, it's great that
he was able to do so much.
I think another thing about the actor that I found very appealing was his take on the series' legacy, where he feels that David Lynch and Twin Peaks in general were, as he put it, playing the record at a different speed from other people, and in a lot of cases that evoke strong responses.
Yes, and he feels that...
Go on.
He feels that great art evokes strong responses.
Use the word visceral.
Visceral.
I really resonate with his ideas. It's not always the case. I don't want to get wrapped up that it always has to cause strong responses. But generally, if I'm like debating on seeing a movie and I find out people either love it or hate it, I'm more interested than I am a movie that's getting consistent 6 out of 10s.
I think that whenever something tries to push things in a stronger end, that's where it's just going to stick with you, and which I think is like something that great art really does. It's something that will probably inspire other things just because of how passionately it went in one direction, whether or not that art you make is going to oppose or coincide with that same direction.
Yes. Only 2 more actors left. Both are a bit smaller time, I would say, within the scope of Twin Peaks. First up, we have Charlotte Stewart. That is the actor for Betty Briggs, also the one who had played the girlfriend/wife in Eraserhead all those years ago.
Yes. Suitcase.
I thought it was really interesting that she brought up that toward the end of season 2, they were not receiving full scripts anymore, such that the actors who wanted to know what's going on, they would get together like for dinner at each other's houses. They would like rotate whose house it is.
Yep.
And they would share what their script had so they can put the show together, because it wouldn't be on the air right away. So they wanted to know what's going to happen.
So when they figure out that Cooper got shot, it's just like, oh no.
I guess we're out of a job anymore.
Oh no.
So I just thought that was really cute that they all go to each other's houses for dinner.
I thought there was a lot of cute things that went along with Charlotte, especially with like the idea of like bringing along an enormous cactus plant, because that's something that would just be cool with David Lynch and the like. I think that the fact that it's similar to Audrey with the like, hey, here's the character Audrey and here's the character Betty Briggs, with the similar response of like, who?
And I think that Charlotte Stewart brings a lot to a very small role. I think that there's a sort of presence to the character that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for what she brings to the table, because the actual writing is pretty small. Although, when we ever get to the international pilot and you see the first episode, the pilot again, because it's mostly the same until the end, it's very funny to me that Charlotte Stewart, Betty Briggs, when they're having the phone call with, like, where's Laura? Sarah Palmer's, like, calling everyone.
Yes.
Charlotte Stewart is holding like a knife. So it makes Betty Briggs seem like secretly terrifying because she's on the phone talking and she's got like this blade in her hand.
She calmly knits while like working through revelations with her husband.
Yeah.
She has knives in her hands. Like, I see no issues.
I just find it funny because Betty Briggs is one of the most like unequivocally peaceful people according to seasons 1 and 2. We have reason to believe they're the only faithful couple to exist in Twin Peaks.
And speaking of faithful couples, we also have one of the most faithful couples, or at least half of them, inside one of these interviews, and that would be Robin Lively, who did play the role of...
You gonna say it?
I'm trying to read it from your eyeballs.
I'll tell you with my eyeballs. Okay, I did it.
Dan Ashbrook.
No.
No.
Do you want me to jump in?
I got this. Dwayne and Dougie and Lana.
Budding Milford.
I got it.
You didn't do Budding, though. Anyway,
Lana Milford.
She revealed that it was her idea as an actor to treat the role with the Southern accent. That was kind of her personal touch. And when she went to the interview, she wasn't sure if she was going to get the role, but she wanted to leave an impression.
Oh, yeah. As she described it, she was going for like a dingbat Southern
No.
feel.
No. Dingbat ha-ha.
Dingbat haha.
That's how she explained her act, which I thought that was cool to know.
I think it's cool to know as well. It seems that overall she had a lot of fun sort of like bringing that special style to it that I don't think that anyone that would have been more subtle would have been,
because it's not a subtle character.
It's not. I think like adding that, even just like that little small choice, and just like playing along with even just like the sound and candor of her voice while she's lulling people in, it makes some heavily like memorable performances, especially when they decide, we should put her in with the guy with the gun.
If they would have been able to extort another season after season 2 right away, if they would have had a season 3 like a few months later or a year later or whatever, I would have wanted Lana's character to do some things. Like, I would have wanted Lana to be a character to be explored more. Because I feel like we only ever got, like, a little teaser of what Lana... Did I say Laura?
No, you said Lana.
Okay, I was worried I said Laura. We only ever got, like, a teaser of what Lana's character can be like. I feel like we don't really know Lana Milford. Is that fair to say? We know a character of her, but I don't think we know her.
We know her as much, if not a little bit more, than we know Lil Nicky.
I don't know if there's much to know about Little Nicky.
There's enough to know to like question Lil Nicky.
He's the devil. We already know this. What more do you need? There's a whole bunch of stories about the devil, okay? You don't need to expand upon that. Lana Milford, though, is new mythology.
I'm just saying that we could have a second sort of like Paradise Lost situation, you know?
Speaking of books...
Yeah, books.
On Disc 7, there's a crew interview section that opens up with Jennifer Lynch, the author of the book, not Paradise Lost, although it's often compared to it, The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer.
I've never felt a harder right turn that was like so casually put through. I feel like my life
veered off the road.
No, my life was put in danger at this point in the podcast.
I don't feel safe anymore podcasting. But
I never did.
I thought this was really cool to see an interview with Jennifer Lynch preserved here.
I think that it's like one of those perspectives that you want to actively know, but you don't really expect to like pop up in these.
Right. Because I wouldn't consider her crew for Twin Peaks.
Yeah, no, especially on Disc 7.
Disc 7.
Yeah, because Disc 7 is still within the second season of the series. If we were to go into something like... I would even like imagine seeing this pop up for like maybe Firewalk with Me.
So yeah, we get more of a sense of how this came to be. She said that she was given a list of characters that she had to include in some way, just to make the story make sense, and a semblance of ideas of where the show was going to go.
Now, mind you, like beforehand, like this, it's a horrifying situation to be put into these prompts firsthand, because she was told, like she was given a call as like, hey, this is David Lynch. Not in David Lynch's voice. Come over to Mark Frost's house with myself and Mark Frost, and we'll have a conversation. And she was one of the very few people, one of three people, which likely was David Lynch and Mark Frost, because I don't think they kept each other in the dark about this, that knew Laura Palmer's killer. So to have this, and then those sort of prerequisites of like, okay, here you go. Here's the secret. Here is a few characters that you've got to keep in. Other than that, go wild.
And she reports having a lot of creative freedom. And I think would be kind of hypocritical if David Lynch and Mark Frost didn't give her creative freedom, considering they themselves need that as creators themselves. But she said that of the diary, you know, people ask her, are there things in there that are based on her own life? And she said there were two things.
And only one thing that she's willing to tell.
And the one is that there is a dream in the diary of Laura sitting in a corner of a room, and there is a rat that she knows is going to come and bite her foot off. So Laura instead bites her own foot off first. That is a dream that Laura has in the book that Jennifer Lynch had in real life.
Yay!
The other thing that has in common is a mystery. I like that strategy, by the way, of like revealing one but not the other. It's very alluring as a concept because it doesn't really give you the full story. It lets you linger and wonder. It could be something completely normal. Maybe she had a dream once about an old lady at a gas station. So just like the log lady. But that's it. That's the only similarity.
And it's not even like dreams that are covered. It's just like two things that happen in the book, which is that vague language that even like pushes you further.
But the book is so raw and personal that I get why she's asked that by people, because it really feels lived in. Yeah. And also that our insight was curious about Mrs. Tremond. She said that she saw Mrs. Tremond as someone who might be forgiving of Laura Palmer. And that the Meals on Wheels was kind of a manifestation of Laura trying to find that redemption. That was interesting, I thought. And then similar to Mark Frost, she comments on Twin Peaks as being connected to sort of time. She said, it's got today, it's got yesterday, and it is the embodiment of what we remember of our day, of our youth, and what we anticipate about growing old. So there's that contradiction element of it is the youth, but it's also growing old. It is the past, it is the future. It is timeless, stuck in time.
You can't have a quarter with both sides.
We then move on to a series of director interviews. And again, it doesn't always say if they did like a season 1. So I think I got all of them caught up here. So first one is Todd Holland, who is the director of episodes 11 and 20. I know these are just numbers to you, Professor, but 11 and 20.
Yep.
And Todd said that he had been a huge fan of season 1.
Big fan, copious amounts of notes, which again...
Unabomber
impressive.
levels, he said.
Yeah, which is impressive, again, for a TV show that you cannot, like, actively do anything unless you're recording tapes and then...
You're right.
Like, rewatching it that way. So the fact that, like, we're going through crazy things and just pausing it back and forth, just imagine the extra amount of hurdles one has to make to be at, like, Holland levels of, like, intricate.
And when he finally got brought into the show, he was very quick to ask a lot of questions to Mark Frost.
Yeah.
To the extent that crew members would tell him later that Mark Frost told him things that he didn't tell anyone else.
Yeah.
That he became kind of privy to certain ideas. And Holland was the one who had come up with the opening to episode 11, which is the one where it zooms out from that tile hole going to Leland.
Yep, apparently, like, there was just a simple sort of thing in which, like, it was just, like, Sheriff Truman telling Leland, nope, here are your rights and so on, while Leland is looking absently. So he goes into that sort of position. It's like, oh, how's this even
You can
work?
imagine that looking so boring as, like, an episode opening.
Yeah.
It could be the most, like, neutral, stale opening ever. And don't get me wrong, like, not every opening in Twin Peaks is that amazing. I love the show, but if they would have opened with just, like, a fade out from black, Leland's at a desk, there's the moody Twin Peak music, and Sheriff walks in, it would have felt like a normal opening. I wouldn't have questioned it.
But the thing is that he takes it to, like, a level that he's like, okay, what am I going to do with it? He sits down, gets into the headspace, and actually, like, focuses on one thing.
He sits in the chair that Leland's going to be in.
Yes, and he just looks into the tile, and that's when, like, inspiration strikes.
He looks at the same thing Leland would be looking at and goes from that. And apparently, in the original writing of it, he got too close to the truth. Because this is before the killer had been revealed. So that was in there, too, that he accidentally was bumbling up to the truth and had to take out some words in the opening because, according to Todd Holland, he had got too close. Which, again, I think is very, very interesting at that moment. I know, again, that for you, as you watch, the episodes got better and better and better, but that episode 11 opening is so special.
It is. It
So
genuinely is, for all sorts of reasons.
He also made a comment that Twin Peaks is a very inexpensive show to make, which I didn't know. That's cool to know.
Yeah, no.
I never would have known budget-wise where Twin Peaks fell.
Yeah, no, from what I've been hearing, as far as, like, when they're trying to even save a little bit on the budget, I'm just kind of curious on where did budget go? I just out of morbid curiosity, not to say
Donuts.
like I'm accusing.
I'm
like,
pretty
saying,
sure it was in donuts.
it's all donuts. Like, specifically, donuts, it ran on donuts. It didn't run on Dunkin', but on donuts.
Next, we have Caleb Deschanel, director of episodes 6, 15, and 19.
Okay.
He says that he had known David Lynch since the Eraserhead days. They had been on friendly terms around the time that Lynch had asked him to direct a couple episodes, and he agreed. And he was, as far as his contributions, was the one who came up with the idea to show Ben and Jerry with their flashback of the dancing girl.
Yes.
This was, again, a result of David Lynch encouraging the directors to bring in their own ideas. Curious enough, little anecdote, the dancing girl was Emily Fincher, who played that role, and that was David Fincher's sister, which, if you don't know, David Fincher is another famous director. Notable works in the 90s would include the movie Seven. So I think it's very interesting that, you know, David Fincher's sister was the one who was dancing on the set.
I don't know why, but okay, I can believe you.
Well, a famous director's relative was on there.
Well, I'm sure that there's all sorts of people that have famous connections throughout, like LA. Why specifically this person? Is there
any
something
specific.
connection?
I think it's also interesting that the other director we're going to talk about here, Stephen Gyllenhaal, is the father of Jake Gyllenhaal. I just think things are interesting.
And eventually we'll reach Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, that's interesting. So otherwise, he kind of came in with this take that Twin Peaks isn't as weird as people say it is. Deschanel said that you just kind of have to accept that these types of characters exist in real life in humanity. They are out there. And the more somebody, I think he's indicating the writers and directors.
Yes.
The more a writer and director tries to treat it like it's fantastical, like it's super weird, it's going away from the truth about the show. And it's making things more one-dimensional. And basically, that's the opposite direction of where he thinks the show should go.
Okay.
Which is something that we heard echoed in a few of the interviews. I think going back to Sherilyn Fenn, the Audrey actor, made a similar comment that some writers and directors, not saying names, were not getting the idea of the dark inner worlds of the characters, but were instead embellishing the weird for the sake of weird. There was that feeling, I think, among some of the cast and crew. And as far as directors who felt that they knew the world of Twin Peaks really well, Dwayne Dunham's not very shy in saying that in his interview.
Oh.
He talks about how he had been involved with the pilot.
Okay.
And as a result of helping edit the pilot, he was able to kind of carry the torch when David Lynch was off working on Wild at Heart during the shooting of episode 1. And so Dwayne Dunham was the director of episodes 1, and then later on 18 and 25. Quite a bit of a break there. And he kind of talked about how he felt like he understood the characters probably the best after David Lynch and Mark Frost in those early days, just from having been around that a lot. He refers to his memory of when he had been directing the part, I think it's in episode 18, where Ben is watching the old footage of himself, where it's young Ben, young Jerry, and the father. And that sort of groundbreaking video. And adding that a lot of the stuff that Richard Bamer was doing with Ben, that he just kind of let him go wild on it. That was mostly Bamer's ideas.
Yes, and I do find it very great that we do have the moment and scene, which apparently was all the actor, in which like he kind of like went to town with like looking at the overall footage and just like he wouldn't just cry on the set for it.
Yes.
Apparently that was just like the icing on the cake, especially for when it came to Dwayne. I will say that it's funny to kind of like consider someone who does, say, for example, say that he is very connected towards these characters alongside with his other directors, which seems like something very bold to say. While on the other hand, he's also very humbled by someone like David Lynch, in which he says that he owes his career to David.
Yeah, he basically viewed himself as like the best pick to direct episode 1 after the pilot when Mark Frost and David Lynch weren't as around, which... I don't know. Interesting. I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't around. But I think that's interesting.
Speaking of interesting, I think that there is one person that you would really want to
I mentioned off pod,
on.
Stephen Gyllenhaal. So Stephen Gyllenhaal, since we, of course, were interested in interesting things, like I said before, father of Jake Gyllenhaal and Maggie Gyllenhaal, of course. Director of episode 27. He had one episode. His interview is among the stranger of all these ones.
Now, why would that be, Kalil?
So... he opens up by saying that the show is against Western civilization. Notice how no one else has said that. It's a very bold claim.
It is
He
very
says
bold.
that the show is almost pagan.
Yes. Now, what do you think that means, Kalil?
I think what he means, this is my guess at his words, is that he views the show as kind of calling to a mysticism that is not as binary, black and white as most Western civilization facets of Christianity. You can even maybe argue capitalism in some ways. I think there's this vague notion that maybe he's drawing on that the mysticism of the woods, the Native American spirituality, the Red Room ideas, the dweller in the threshold, that those ideas exist more in a pagan belief system than a like Abrahamic religion.
Okay.
That's my guess. It's an incredibly vague statement. And he doesn't really elaborate that much.
It's a statement. An incredibly vague statement.
What do you think? Do you agree? Is it pagan?
It was something that I had a harder grasp on because I'm less than familiar with like pagan beliefs and
that's the thing is pagan beliefs. Pagan just basically means heathen. It could be any non-Christian religion.
As far as, again, I don't know much about paganism. I don't know about like in that realm. So I feel that I didn't have much to sort of think, consider, and say outside my field.
By no means am I an expert. I am not pagan, nor is anyone super close to me pagan. I knew some pagans in high school. But at the end of the day, it's any sort of tribal religion, indigenous religion of various cultures around the world, but even extends its branch over to things like Norse belief or Greek or Roman belief. Pagan is literally anything that is not Judeo-Christian, or if you want to extend that, is not part of the major faiths of like Buddhism or Hinduism.
Okay.
A lot of times it's nature related. A lot of times it's involving multiple gods, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not one thing. Like paganism is not one thing. It's no more than saying like Native American is pretending it's one culture when in fact it was many nations. I would link it that way. Many different beliefs under one. So when he says it's pagan, I'm just like, okay, man, like sure. I don't fully vibe with that, but that's interesting to say.
Okay.
And also he said that his biggest feeling when he directed episode 27 is that he just wanted to hang out with all the actors. Which, as like a fan of Twin Peaks, I don't blame you. I'd talk about Mexican food with Don Davis any day of the week. But it's a very funny takeaway compared to like what everyone else said.
It seems like there was like almost like a dramatic sort of like take, almost like buddies in college that he sort of like gets a feel out. Even when he describes, he says, there's one actor that was vain and weird, could not get along with. He's not going to name names.
But they were good in their role because the role required that out of them.
Yes.
I mean, like, that narrows it down, though. It's got to be male, and it's got to be a character who's vain.
Yep.
I'm, like, looking at, like, is it Ben Horn? Is it...
Sure,
this is episode 27, so it's going to be later in there. And what if it's the old man? What if it's the mayor? Like, it could be anyone who's a male who's vain. It could be Dick Tremaine. I mean, that's the image of vanity, I would say, is Dick Tremaine. Oh, I miss Dick Tremaine. Now that I brought him up, I feel sad that we don't have him right now. We don't have him right now in front of us.
Why?
The character, not the actor.
There has to be, like...
Nothing wrong with the actor, but I want the character here.
This has got to be something in which I've got like a range for you personally. Like just one random day, you're going to get a package. It's going to be human-sized. And when you open it up...
Human-sized.
You can open it up and it's like a cardboard cutout of like Dick Tremaine. I realized it sounded like I put Dick Tremaine inside of a box.
Sounded like you definitely did.
But no, I just made a box out of Dick Tremaine.
Yeah. Going back to Gyllenhaal here, he said that bubbling underneath Twin Peaks is something like David Lynch's mind, and that some of the actors could go really deep into that and pull from that, like probably Kyle McLaughlin, right? Others were lost the whole time. He also does not say which ones. And I just thought his interview was super different from anyone else. Strange commentary happening on there. And his energy levels were just so different from everyone else, too.
Yes.
Because, like, the guy right after him was Tim Hunter.
Yep.
And he just seemed, like, so, like, I don't know, like, kind of just mellow compared to the guy who just came before him. He's just kind of, like, I wouldn't say sleepy, but he was kind of, like, just kind of chill about the whole thing.
Very cold.
Whereas Gyllenhaal was, like, really into it.
Someone hit the brakes.
Yeah, it was just very funny.
There.
Tim Hunter's the director of episodes 4, 16, and 28. He had known David Lynch since the AFI, American Film Institute. Also, he just randomly said that he felt episode 4, which he directed, quote, there was a feeling that it was one of the better earlier episodes. Citation needed. I don't know who said that. He just vaguely mentioned that, yeah, people just agree my episode was really good.
So,
Boomst. I'm not saying it's bad, but, like, who said that?
What was this episode? Like
Episode 4?
Yes.
I just pulled up the description on Wikipedia here. I didn't go with the Twin Peaks wiki because it didn't pop up on Google first.
And just making sure it is confirmed this is the same guy and his name is in the credit because, you know, pilot, episode
This
1.
is not Judas Booth. We're good. It is Tim Hunter. This is the one where Sarah Palmer was drawing Killer Frank with Andy, or Andy was drawing him, I should say. This was the one where Cooper interviews Jacoby, and there was the whole weird... I think this was the one with the golf ball situation with Jacoby.
Yeah.
There was also more stuff with Benjamin Horne and Catherine at that motel. Parole hearings for Hank were mentioned. Not Hank yet, but parole hearings. And then they also visit the veterinary clinic. That's where the llama happens. Okay, never mind. I agree. It is one of the best episodes. It had the llama take.
It seems like the majority of this episode seems to be at the same calm demeanor that this man also is in.
Like, it's a good episode. I just think it's funny when he said there's a general feeling that it was one of the better early ones. And I'm like, who says that? I mean, season 1 in general, everyone loves season 1.
You do. You did. You just did.
Well, because the llama. If he would have specified... there was a general feeling that it was one of the better episodes that had a llama in it, I'd be like, 100%.
Okay, Kalil, list top 10 episodes of Twin Peaks with a llama in it.
Number 1, episode 4. End of list. Easy peasy. Also, he made a weird mentioning of the success of Twin Peaks was partly owed to how it could put its finger on your soul, which I just thought was a funny way of wording things.
Yeah.
Not wrong. I don't think he's wrong. It's just funny.
Yeah.
Then the last feature that we can cover without spoilers is Disc 9 archival interviews. And this was for Fire Walk With Me. So they're very short interviews. And the way they're...
So short. It's like, again, like going through all these other interviews firsthand, everything is just like, almost like Whiplash. You can cover all the interviews in about, I think it's like 5 minutes. I'm pretty sure.
And you can tell from how long we talked about it. Like the first interview with like David Lynch and the cast was like a 30-minute thing, wasn't it?
40 or 50 minutes.
So it was quite a long thing. These ones are super short, and they're edited really interesting because they're just like cut to black, recut.
Yeah, it looks
they're not edited. They're just kind of footage.
Yeah, they're just quick footage. You think that there may have been more interview there, or like they're just quickly saying something like, "Hey, quick impressions on like Twin Peaks."
It's definitely promotional. Like they're trying to get you to see the movie.
Like they feel like, as far as it goes, it seems that they're passionate about it.
So
I don't know.
I'd be curious who this was made for.
Maybe
because it's not fully edited, but it's definitely meant to be seen by people to get them to see the movie.
Like maybe like it was like the way it was shot and quickly edited. Maybe they were thinking like maybe we'll do an advertisement with this.
I don't know. Maybe that's a good thought. Maybe it just didn't get used for something and it got rediscovered later.
Mm-hmm.
It's like raw footage. So first one is Ray Wise. Cool to see him. He compares the Fire Walk with movie to a rebirth, which is certainly a description that could be used.
Twin Peaks was like a shooting star that exploded.
And now it's being reborn.
Yep.
He also says at the end, more happens in those 7 days than happened in the whole series on television.
Do you believe in
that
that
much?
sentiment?
I can promise.
He promises this. Does it deliver?
No, that is a bold-faced lie. I really enjoy Fire Walk with Me. It's at least a 9 out of 10. Even on a bad day, it's a 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not more than what happens in the entire series of like 29 episodes. No, it is absolutely not. It is definitely more than what happens in 2 episodes. I can say that.
I would say that even like maybe more episodes. I would say
it's
that,
definitely not more than season 1.
The hardest part about this is that it only like does as much as close to that promise if people have actively watched the series itself and saw all the series. Like at that point, I can see where like someone might have some arguing room in which like, oh, well, it explores so much of Laura Palmer inside like these different scenarios, these different places, and these sorts of characters. Sure. But that's only with the context of the series prior.
Mm-hmm.
Though, allow me to argue how much these actors even knew what was going to go into the film and what wasn't. Let's say if we
had they seen the screening?
Like, it's wondering if like maybe this was shot before the screening. So imagine all the missing pieces. Yeah. If we put the missing pieces together,
still not the whole series.
Still not. You still do not feel like
no.
that's
I don't think that with the missing pieces, it suddenly has more events than the whole. Than 29 episodes worth of content.
29 episodes worth of content where some things are revisited.
It's also the vague statement of more things happen. What does that mean? If you just mean like events, it would be more work to summarize all of Twin Peaks with every detail than it would be to summarize Fire Walk with Me and Missing Pieces.
Now we're seeing this like in the future, and if there was a point in which
the future of distant past, et cetera,
if someone like saw this missing footage and just like got that impression and went to see the film itself, I'm kind of curious on whether or not it would have that, like that little soft pull, like psychological effect.
It disappoints you almost because it wasn't as much.
I would argue that maybe it might not disappoint, but you're actively looking for that, and then you become more convinced.
Go either way. Either way, I don't think his promise works for me.
We want our refund back.
Yes. Next up is Sheryl Lee. I don't want my refund back from this interview. It was good. And I really enjoy that, first off, she is being interviewed in front of a fireplace. And also above the fireplace is a picture of herself with the Laura Palmer's actors. And then Leland and Sarah's actors, too. The happy family. Right above the fireplace.
Yep. Yeah.
It's great background.
Aha.
And, I get the sense out of Sheryl Lee that sort of like with the Harold situation, really connecting to her character. And I don't know. I mean, same as Jennifer Lynch connected to Laura, I think, too, right in the diary. Sheryl Lee said that when she shot the film Fire Walk with Me, it was living a lifetime in 2 short months.
She describes it as one of the most amazing experiences she's ever had. And like to have like these very like heavy reactions to it is pretty cool, I got to say. Despite the fact that how lonely Laura was also a bit of emphasis.
And I'll read the quote here where she emphasized it because she says it like repeatedly in this one quote. Quote, "Thank God for David because he's so brilliant that he gets you through and he helps you find it. It was an incredibly lonely role. One of Laura's big things is her loneliness. And that is what I will always remember about her the most. And that's the emotion I felt the most while playing the role. I don't think a day went by that I didn't feel an incredible loneliness. And that was, at times, very hard to deal with.
There's also, going into the further David Lynch aspect of that, she also mentions that it, in order to work with him, you kind of have to be living in that moment and willing to go wherever he takes you. And the fact that we're going into these sort of darker places.
And that Lynch, that actors are consistently comfortable enough with Lynch to go into those places.
Yes.
It's a lot to ask of an actor to enter the place of mind that someone like Sheryl Lee would have had to enter for Laura Palmer. That is a very harrowing role.
Yes.
And to be in that role and that mindset for 2 months, you have to really trust that the director and writer you're working with, who's on set with you, David Lynch, you have to trust him.
If the accounts are correct and this person is noted as humble and kind, comes from a very good place, and we're still going into these dark places along with him, it's much more of a different reaction, say, for example, other horrifying places with other directors, say, for example, Stanley Kubrick, notably for The Shining.
Stanley Kubrick will... If accounts are to be believed, which there are a lot of accounts of this, he is more likely to put you through more hell.
Yep.
He is more likely to make you less comfortable and treat you kind of as a prop. Like, I love Kubrick's films. Big fan of The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey. At the same time, I mean, that reminds me of this video I ended up seeing a long time ago from the YouTuber Maggie Mae Fish. I don't watch a lot of her content usually. It's just a different style than what I'm into. But I do want to mention she did a video on Stanley Kubrick versus David Lynch. It has spoilers for Lost Highway if you're worried about spoilers. But that one contrasted how they both worked with actors so differently.
Yeah.
And how both had very dark themes in their movies, but one of them would help you through it and one of you would make it worse. So this is not an original thought that we have. Other people have said this too. There's something to that. Also, going back to David Lynch, Moira Kelly, the actor who ends up playing Donna in Fire Walk with Me, compares him to a crazy uncle, which I think is a good thing in this case.
Yeah, apparently, he's a very supportive director. The whole entire production of itself was bizarre and fun working throughout it.
She also promises if you like the series, you'll love the movie, which is not historically correct.
That is...
There are many people who did not love the movie who loved the series.
Honestly, I'm still kind of blown away by that, but that's just my sort of thing. I would be probably in the surprise booth along with maybe Nora.
I think that even though you feel that way, you still got to agree they're very different.
They are very different.
And anytime you have a huge difference between one installment of a series and another one, there's always going to be that group of the fan base that doesn't like the change. And I'm not even saying they're wrong. You might legitimately think Fire Walk with Me is a bad movie for good reasons.
Yes.
There's a lot of bands that I'll listen to and they'll create a new album and I'll hate their new album. It's not because I'm a fake fan. It's because I just don't like what they're doing. It's quite possible to like the humor of Twin Peaks and then go into Fire Walk with Me and feel like it's too miserable. It's no longer entertainment. It's just misery and not find value in that. That's a valid takeaway. But for a lot of Twin Peaks fans over time, more and more people have come around to love Fire Walk with Me over time.
And one thing that I do adore as far as looking more into Moira Kelly is that apparently from her account, she says the crew and cast were very nice. That's one thing that she was very nervous on, was that she's hopping into a role that, hey, there's all sorts of people that have recognized who Donna was. And to have her jump into the Donna role, obviously that's something to be nervous about. Twin Peaks was very sizable, especially for things like European audiences over time. So to have that little bit of comfort, I think that's amazing.
I just kind of realized something as you were talking. So I knew that Moira Kelly, I knew her from one other role. I don't know if I ever mentioned it on the pod. There's only one thing else that I'm aware of Moira Kelly being in. You know what it is?
I'm afraid.
It's The Lion King. And I was looking up, I was like, wait. How far apart were these movies? So she was Donna in 1992, and she was Nala in 1994.
Yes.
So, obviously production isn't the same as release date, but it's about 2 years separation between being in Fire Walk with Me and Disney's The Lion King. And I just think those are almost the exact opposites of movies in terms of their feeling and aesthetic and audience and everything. That it's very funny.
One is about means of death and destruction that ends up sort of crumbling a world around them. And the other one is Fire Walk with Me.
The last actor of all these interviews is Mädchen Mick. Again, returning to us for, is this her third interview? with this collection we looked at?
I was actually surprised that we got Machen this time because
she's like the next person who gets interviewed, I guess, for Fire Walk with Me stuff, which is interesting.
Yeah, because I would say she still like has like more presence in the roles inside of it.
I was surprised they didn't have Sarah Palmer's actor for Grace Zabriskie.
I mean, Sarah Palmer, she was in the movie less
than Shelley.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because we took some time with Shelley Johnson inside the Double R. We also had like a little bit of time with Leo's, if we count if you
count the deleted scenes, especially the missing pieces.
Meanwhile, I feel like we're just quickly I think that you can have all of Sarah Palmer's lines on a sticky note.
Okay, fine.
So
lines are not everything for a performance.
It's not. They also deleted scenes in her physical performances which were amazing.
Yeah.
Again, there's no doubt against the actor. I think the more surprising person that was left out would have probably been the actor for Teresa Banks.
Oh wow, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I said that in a very Midwestern.
Oh yeah, for sure, North Dakota.
I'd go on a limb and say that potentially having the interview for any of the agent characters would have been notable. I mean, the obvious one would be Desmond.
Mm-hmm.
Having Chris Isaac, be doing an interview.
Now, that's where, again, I feel that this may have been a potential trailer or advertisement because Shelley's character is someone who is facially more recognizable
for Twin Peaks fans. Good point.
So that's where I kind of lean into that instead of, again, actors more prominent throughout the movie.
Sure. So, first off, with Machen and Mick, okay, I just want to very quickly say I really like the outfit she's wearing in this interview. She's got this great, reddish pinkish turtleneck sweater that goes with this red hat, and I couldn't tell what the earrings were, but it was this great color combination of pink and red. Very, very good outfit choice.
Clearly, no one else had a good impression with their clothes.
I already talked about the fireplace for
people don't wear fireplaces, Kalil.
I mean, arguably, Anakin Skywalker kind of wore a fireplace a couple times. Anyway, I don't know. No one had a striking of an outfit. I'm sorry, okay? Machen and Mick was talking about David Lynch again. She says that he creates the way you talk and the way you walk, and it's really fun to work with someone like that. She also remembers this one time where David Lynch kept telling her to lean her head up to look at the ceiling, and she just kept being told more, lean your head more, keep leaning it back, all the way back. And she turns to David Lynch and she's like, would anyone really do this? What does this even mean?
Nobody would do this. This is the movies.
Which I think that answer is very revealing for what Lynch is doing versus a lot of directors contemporarily, is that Lynch does not view film as reality. And that's important because a lot of people treat movies like they need to be grounded in our reality. Mm-hmm. There is a reality to the stories, but the reality of Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks, Eraserhead is not necessarily our reality.
Now, mind you, it's not to say that these are two different schools of thought that I think are important. It's not to say one is more right than the other, but Twin Peaks most certainly fits best in recognizing what it is.
Yeah. So not trying to do things just because they're normal, but looking at the idea of what would a character in this world do, and being willing to over dramatize for certain effects. Mm-hmm. I think if Lynch pared down to reality more, I think Twin Peaks would have a much less interesting tone. Mm-hmm. Which, that concludes all of the interviews.
Man, if only we could end all our podcasts when it's we're done here. Good night, everybody. We'll leave the microphones on for you in case you need them, but elsewise, I'm going to bed.
There was a lot of really good content here. Again, imploring you that if you have the ability to see these interviews yourself, to check them out if any of these sounded interesting. Mm-hmm. The grid. Look at the grid. Admire the grid.
Don't admire.
Lick the screen.
Just sit there and just similar to Leland Palmer looking at the little hole in the wall. Just take it all in and have it take you in.
Watch me. That's what it'll say to you. Mm. I have two wonderful and strange questions of the week.
Okay.
You look like an eye roll at me. What was that?
It wasn't an eye roll.
What was that?
It was an eye point. I am pointing my eyes at you.
Okay. First
Give me my question.
Answer this however you want. What are the main things you'll take away from these interviews Whether it's about Twin Peaks, production, legacy, David Lynch. What really struck you now that we've kind of gone through all of those?
I think that admiring the individual parts of the overall production is something that I'm going to probably be more engaged with. And I feel like there's almost like a sense of me being so fond of like the passion in some of these like individual roles that I might even go softer on James.
Ooh, that's some dangerous
point,
words.
It's some dangerous stuff. I could be completely wrong, but it would absolutely let me put on a new set of lenses. Whether or not it's from my biases here or from my biases before being taken off. And just kind of like take in those moments and see how well they hold up. So that is what I am expecting to happen. Not sure if it'll be in its entirety. Still, it's like a fun romp through a museum.
Don't romp in the museum.
I will romp
like
as I please.
Politely walk through,
No.
look at the visuals, and
Why do I have to do everything by those sort of terms and rules? It seems like the thing that I should take away from these interviews and so on is that I should avoid those rules at all costs.
Professor,
and
you can't just take
them,
art pieces off the wall and start dancing with them in the public
We need
gallery.
to take them as we please so that we can actually live through our experiences and make the stories we need to. This is also not legal advice, just to say, please do not do the following things that I would end up doing.
My second question.
Now, you're doing the eye roll. That's not an eye point, or otherwise you're pointing it across the room.
No, that was an eye roll. I will not deny it. If you could add 3 more interviews to these special features, anyone who was not interviewed, or if you for some reason want another interview with someone who's already been featured,
Yes.
who are the 3 cast or crew members you would want interviewed?
I think, what was his name? Eric DeRay?
Eric DeRay for Leo?
Yep. I think that he brings up a very unique role that I don't really see throughout the whole entire series, if you will.
Yeah.
Not only just this outright rage, but I want to know like where he kind of comes from, where he like ends up getting into that mind space, especially being that little bit of charm. I want to see that little bit of charm that I keep hearing about him. And not to mention like how he feels about the shifts and changes that happened into the second season. I think that would be a very exciting second point of view. Second one, whoever the actor for Little Nicky was, I think that actor, seeing as that person was already watching Twin Peaks as a child, did Twin Peaks really kind of continue to grow with him as he sort of like kept growing older himself?
And that's Joshua Harris is the name of the actor.
Yes. Did he grow up with Twin Peaks and continue on? Was that passion around him for quite some time? Or is it just something that sort of passed by as he continued on towards other roles? Again, it's very interesting to see it from the perspective of a child.
So you would want an interview with Little Nicky's actor at the time the other interviews were done, like in the 2000s?
No, I think now, because I think that there's enough like retroactive sort of experience that he could just like give stories of, but also what's in the present. Obviously, the biases of memory can come into play in which it may not be 100% reliable, but I still think that retroactive look, especially in that younger mindset, is something too like too chewy to not want to chew. Too chewy. Don't
talk about chewiness with this child actor, you weirdo.
I'm not saying chewiness with a child actor. The actor is grown. I'm talking about the adult actor who was once a child.
This like man in his 30s
we all were children once, so I'm saying that whoever this man is in their 30s, I want to chew him.
Who is your third person? Who is your third person? Criminal.
And how about we bring in Scott Frost?
Okay.
We got Jennifer Lynch. Why not Scott Frost, who was also a writer of a prior book? Maybe lesser known, sure, but at the same time, to be a individual who was in charge of a very popular character, in which it seems that may or may not have connections. I'm imagining likely has connections to Mark Frost.
If you say character, what are you referring to?
Well, he handled the book for Special Agent Dale Cooper.
Correct.
Yes. And meanwhile, Jennifer Lynch handled
Okay,
Laura
so you're
Palmer.
just saying the character he wrote as.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you meant he acted. I'm like, he didn't act in the show.
He acted, but through his words.
Well,
of the written
I
way.
bring that up because, you know, Warren Frost, the father of Mark Frost, that he had acted, right?
Yes.
Warren Frost was Mr. Chainsaw Hands himself.
But no, I think that there are some very fun insights. I've only looked through a little bit of the book so far. But say, for example, getting into that mind space of Dale Cooper, that's far more calculated, and it does start inside of his youth, on what sort of processes go into something such as that. So No, I think that I like looking at the mechanics of things. So if I want to go deeper into it, I want to go into some of the more obscured media.
Okay, that's perfectly fair. For myself, I based the first two I picked mainly on what I've heard from their interviews so far through the Brad Dukes Reflection book.
Okay.
So, two perspectives I want to hear more from. Wendy Robbie, who played Nadine.
Okay.
And Richard Bamer, who played Benjamin Horn. Bamer, I know with his photography, has always had an interesting element behind scenes. And he also appears to have been oblivious to a lot of the dirtier, sordid elements of his character, which I think is funny. But he just has such an insightful perspective, I think, to offer from what I've read of his interviews. Also, the way that Wendy Robbie was able to connect to her character, Nadine. Yeah. I think she really grasped that sadness in her character and saw the depth of that character. Mm-hmm. So I would have loved to hear more from those two actors in particular. And then this is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is so tantalizing. On the other hand, it is a forbidden fruit. I am, of course, speaking of Kevin Young, the actor for Toad. Do you dare open Pandora's box? Do you dare hear that man speak words out of character?
Or speak.
I have to.
He doesn't speak in character either.
That isn't just grumbling. I would want a Toad interview. I am willing to accept the potential cost.
And such as to Pandora's box, as soon as this person opens their mouth, suddenly the evils of the world escape, and we're only left with hope.
Next up, I believe we're looking at Blue Velvet. So if you are looking to rewatch the movie or maybe see it for the first time prior to our deep dive discussion, that I'm sure will be quite lengthy and exhaustive as usual, and full of fun, I would recommend you check it out. I will say, however, that I know it's not available on Criterion Channel right now, so we're going to watch it in our sweet Criterion Blu-ray copy, but if you don't have it on physical media, I think it's currently available to rent on Amazon, and you can find it over on Hulu streaming, I believe.
At the time,
at least at the time of recording, depending on where you live, et cetera, et cetera.
At the time this is recording, at this time, it looks like Stars is kind of a hold on to it. So if you pay that extra bit of money for this very specific service,
or if there's a free trial or something, for Amazon channels or whatever.
For new subscribers only, but you
could do a lot of times on Amazon you can do those subscriptions, little trials. Yeah. That might work for it. I don't know.
Might work, might not.
Look, listener, you're resourcul.
You are.
You will find out.
Just you.
You will pursue all of the legal courses of watching Blue Velvet legally. And you'll join us to talk about it.
As well as your lawyers, in case they
And I do want to make sure we're clear on this. We never stated out loud, but we expect that you, listener, are talking to us when we're doing the pod. So as we're talking, I assume that you are also talking out loud. Don't worry. We can hear you.
Yes, absolutely. And
if
honestly,
it doesn't seem like we're replying, it's just because we're kind of in the middle of our own conversation.
Yeah.
We're hearing every word you say to yourself.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you're out in the park, or you're at the McDonald's, or if you're in bed. We hear you.
Or in your bed, which is in the park next to a McDonald's.
Or if you're neck deep in a ball pit.
You are popping like crazy.
If you are on the set of Mary Poppins 2 Electric Boogaloo.
You have so many P's you're putting into this.
I am just testing your microphone quality.
Because you're closer at this point, so yes, it would pop.
If you are at the Orville Redenbacher's Popcorn Factory, and you are currently being turned into popcorn Willy Wonka style, and you are shouting unto heaven, Orville, pop me. We'll hear ya.